Hello, I'm Christopher Nolan, the director of TENET.
Hello Chris, my name's Ant and I'm dissecting TENET.
I just want to say hello to all of you movie fans.
I hate when people talk during the movie.
Shut your fucking mouth!
I'm absolutely thrilled that you're going to get the opportunity to experience TENET on the big screen. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much.
So I'm uploading this, my second video about TENET in 2024. This was the year I saw the trailer for the exclusive one-week only IMAX screening of TENET scheduled for February 23rd.
From Christopher Nolan, your eyes will see things they haven't quite seen before.
Time travel. No. Inversion.
The remarkable thing about this is, Christopher Nolan's TENET was first released 4 years ago, August 26 in 2020, during the pandemic in the past.
Whoa.
For the past 6 months, the world had lived in a sea of disinformation that encouraged most of us to just stay at home. COVID-19 and social distancing crippled the movie industry. This made TENET the only summer blockbuster to get a theatrical release that year. I went to see it, my son went to see it, even Tom Cruise went to see it.
Wear your mask.
The actor shared a video on Twitter where he attends a screening of Christopher Nolan's Tenet in London.
Tenet.
How did that happen?
The few and far between rolled up to the IMAX.
Here we are.
We stepped out in our Mortal Kombat cosplay and went.
Back to the movies.
Movie audiences removed their masks only to eat their popcorn, drink their drinks and cough. The movie clocked in at 2 hours 30 minutes and opened to mixed reviews.
Back in the movie theater, everybody.
It got a 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. You know, that beacon of integrity for movie reviewers. The movie came and went, faring just above average. The positive comments ranged from
I loved it. I loved it.
Big movie, big screen. Loved it, he wrote.
all the way down to...
I was just curious what you thought of the film, because you had such a passionate discussion about Dunkirk. Tenet was an incredible experience. I'm just curious where you were on that movie.
I think I need to see it again.
With subtitles?
Yeah. I think I need to see it again.
The negative reviews ranged from, if he's over there, how can there be another version of him be over here while he's back there? And what the fuck?
I don't get it.
All the way to, I can't hear what they're saying. It's like they're trying to talk to me in a rave. The film's box office performance was hindered by closed theatres, limited capacity and audiences' fears regarding safety. Tenet's production budget was $200 million plus the same for marketing. When all was said and done, Warner Brothers had lost over $100 million on their investment, and Christopher Nolan had the biggest flop of his career.
Fuck it.
These are the facts, and they are undisputed.
But now, as of this moment in time, in the twilight of 2024, upon its re-release, Tenet, its second time around, has now increased its box office revenue. When all was said and done, again, the 70mm IMAX on digital and film cinema release had grossed over $360 million, reducing overall damage and essentially breaking even.
Well, I've seen too much. Well, we'll try and keep up.
Now, considering the concepts of inversion, time travel, and the very nature of time loops and paradox, you and I have just come to the same realization. This year, 2024, I have watched a trailer for an upcoming movie that we have already seen and experienced 4 years ago in the past 2020, creating a better outcome in a 4-year loop scenario no one can ever change because
what's happened's happened, which is an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world.
That is so fucking Tenet. Now, before we discuss the movie, I'm going to invert so I can drop or catch some knowledge on you, depending on your point of view and the point in time you're viewing this. I guess you could say, I'm going to drop it, and you're going to be
catching it.
But in order to do that,
You've got to come back with me!
Where?
back to 1923. 4 brothers, nope, wrong timeline.
4 brothers.
Harry, Albert, Sam and Jack, aka the Warner Brothers, founded Warner Communications.
From the entertainment capital of the world, produced for television by Warner Brothers.
Over the decades, the company goes from strength to strength and becomes a household name in the world of media entertainment. 1990. Approaching the turn of the century, Warner Communications officially merged with Time Incorporated to create Time Warner. They started getting creative with their movie intro logos. The The Matrix intro symbolises the green code of dissimulation in contrast to the black sky of the real world. When Orphan's black light turned on, it revealed Esther's artwork simultaneously dark and luminous. One of my absolute favourites was at the beginning of Constantine when the viewer gets to travel between realms and the logo gets incinerated from Hell's heat blast and shockwave. From 1990 to present day, the Time Warner symbol remains high in the sky. The reflection of the Warner Brothers movie lots and sound stages can be seen as we move around the ever-evolving studio logo. 2020, Tenet gets its worldwide theatrical release.
Here we are.
Now let's revert back to normal and re-enter the event.
Back to the movies.
And if I'm not mistaken, boys and girls, this is about where we came in, revealing the beginning was the end and the end was the beginning.
Control operations to temporal pincer. Move!
Mine. Time pincer complete and audience up to speed. So hit the bell, like and subscribe to keep the hype alive, and let's suit up for some spy-fi. Part 2. The Present. The Warner Brothers studio logo turns red as music plays representing regular forward time. We then invert to see the filmmaker's logo. Christopher Nolan, along with his wife Emma Thompson, the producer of his movies and his children, created and own Syncopy. The image turns blue as the same music plays in reverse, foreshadowing the effect of inversion. As the evening approaches the 14th, patrons take their seats in the Kiev Opera House. The metal sound barriers seal the audience inside.
Can I help you?
Come to see the show.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. No one will be seated after the doors are closed.
It helps maintain the illusion.
Well, actually, it's there to make sure no one sneaks in and not to fuck with the acoustics.
Well, you just let me in, I'll stand in the...
Right, that's it. This incels off to join the separatist movement. The orchestra continues tuning their instruments to concert pitch.
First, the overture. Yes, the strings. Listen carefully, can you hear it? Now the brass.
I can hear it.
The CIA's Ukrainian assets scan the radios for police chatter whilst the Americans, led by an unnamed undercover agent, sit and... Now this guy's played by John David Washington, son of Denzel Washington. Now because JD is essentially a John Doe to us when he enters the story, for the time being, we're just going to call him John. Back inside the opera, the music's about to begin.
The important thing isn't can you read music, it's can you hear it. Can you hear the music?
Yes, I can.
I can hear it.
The well-dressed man is seated in the VIP box with the Russian official and his bodyguard. Their plutonium transaction has been successful and the deep cover agent has it hidden in a bag in a cloakroom area. The audience holds its breath in anticipation as the conductor takes the stage. So, let's talk Music Man.
And Music Man was born.
Music Man?
Christopher Nolan has directed 12 movies to date. Following Memento, Insomnia, Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet, and Oppenheimer. The film scores for Following, Memento and The Prestige were composed by David Julian. Batman Begins and The Dark Knight were composed by James Newton Howard and Hans Zimmer.
So you gonna respect.
This the soundtrack to a Dark Knight, bitch, I'm Hans Zimmer.
But for the majority of Nolan's filmography, it's a Zimmer fest. Inception,
Zimmer.
The Dark Knight Rises,
Zimmer.
Interstellar,
Zimmer.
Dunkirk.
Zimmer.
But this time Hans told Chris no, he couldn't score Tenet as he was going to work on Doom Part 1. So Nolan was all like...
Off your fuck then.
Hans Zimmer.
Meet you in the street and slap you just to break the ice.
So new kid on the block, Ludwig Göransson, the composer of Black Panther, steps in to score the movie.
Here comes the crescendo.
With a much darker tone. The Russian separatists take the opera house hostage. The van outside, working on an anonymous tip, watches Cord, the Ukrainian SWAT team, respond to the siege. The American CIA agents, led by John, put on Cord badges and infiltrate the Ukrainian response unit. Cord proceeds to pump knockout gas into the opera air vents. This moment is actually based on a real event. The gas knocks out the audience and the actual Russian terrorists. Andrei Sator's undercover team put on their oxygen masks and continue hunting for the well-dressed man and looking for the item he's just acquired. As Cord breaches the opera, the Americans splinter off to locate their man. Side note, when this track dropped, the movie house was rocked and I can't believe I was the only one that wanted to get busy! Oi, oi! They split up to search the VIP boxes and they go door to door like Avon ladies.
Kick in the door, wave in the 4-4.
John kills the bodyguard in self-defense, and when the Russian draws his weapon,
Those sneaky Russian dogs.
John dismantles the man's gun in one quick move and gives him a knockout punch. Let's talk in code for a moment, this essentially being a spy movie and all. When spies can't use dead drops and have to meet in public, a word coupled with a gesture may be used to identify an ally or fellow agent.
In Moscow, the rivers are bright in autumn. You have the briefcase to swap?
No, wrong bloke.
What?
Wrong bloke.
You have not the briefcase to swap?
No.
You are not Red Fox?
No. Can't find it out. Seriously, no.
You're not Red Fox?
No, not Red Fox.
I'm sorry, I've made a mistake.
Yeah, sure, carry on.
Sometimes it's a combination of words only another agent will recognise.
Dogs barking, can't fly without umbrella.
What the fuck?
Dogs barking.
Yes, I heard you. I don't quite follow.
But in this case, the CIA have a phrase that is started by one and finished by the other.
I don't know, it's kind of like we almost finish each other's sentences, kind of.
I don't think we've ever finished each other's
sentences.
The security question the secret agents in TENET use is...
We live in a twilight world.
And for those of you who thought this was an Edward Cullen reference just because Arpat is in this movie...
When you are wrong, you are so wrong, it's scary.
The well-dressed man in a state of shock doesn't reciprocate, so...
Right, that's it, the battle's over.
Yeah. Just kidding. Can you imagine if I was like that?
Luckily, John's a super cool guy and he gives him another crack at it.
You've had a squeeze.
We live in a twilight world.
The well-dressed man completes the sentence and passes the authentication test.
And there are no friends at dusk.
Now, I could tell you right now the deeper meaning behind this phrase, but for the time being...
It's all you need to know.
I see. One of those on a need-to-know basis things, is it? Like one of those James Bond films.
And to be quite frank with you...
You'll be briefed on a need-to-know basis.
It's this level of secrecy in the spy genre that started the familiar turn of phrase...
That's classified.
It's what?
It's classified. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Well, I could tell you that, but then I'd have to kill you.
If I told you that, I'm afraid I'd have to kill you.
I'd like to see you try.
Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
That's original.
You see, my identity must remain mysterious and my mission secret. I cannot reveal it to you.
Why not?
Because I would then have to kill you.
Bitch, I'ma kill you!
John lets him know he's been compromised.
You've been made.
The next thing he says is super palindromic. It's so important, we're going to circle back to it at the end of the video.
The siege is a blind for them to vanish you.
Together, they rappel down from the VIP box in a shot straight out The Dark Knight Rises. They try to escape while caught in a crossfire of the Russians and the Ukrainians. This well-dressed pussy tries to play dead.
Do you know why you're meant to play dead? It's to get used to how you're going to be in a minute.
I was so scared I laid there and played possum.
John tries to get to a better vantage point to deal with the separatists when he sees a member of CORD planting explosives to blame on the Russians in order to drum up more support for the Ukrainian cause. John's hesitation exposes him and blows his cover. In the Ukrainian SWAT team up close, John sticks out like a sore thumb. One of John's colleagues backs it.
You've had a squeeze.
No friends at dusk, huh?
I don't know if you noticed it, but I've had your back from day one. Nigga, let's blow this bitch.
Get him to the rally point.
John sprints to the coat check area to intercept the item. He doesn't recognise this as a plutonium capsulation, but he has his orders. At the rally point, John orders the well-dressed man to get naked.
Take off your shirt. My daughter gave it to me for fun. I don't give a shit who gave it to you. Take it off.
And swap clothes with Agent Big Nose.
Don't you call my husband Big Nose?
Well, he has got a big nose.
Ukrainians expecting a passenger.
This is clearly not plutonium-241, but he's assured this is what they're after.
We don't know how old it is, but it's the real deal.
And this guy should know what he's talking about because he's spent some time... John tells Agent Big Nose, who's now disguised as the target of extraction, to come with him and tells the rest of the team...
Take this. Take him, take his exit. I don't trust us anymore.
Before the others extract the asset through the service tunnels into the sewers and up into the street to get clear, John finds out that the bombs are synchronised and can't be defused.
Taking out the audience.
And although he's been sent to simply extract the secret agent, John acts on instinct and goes off script. Saving innocents isn't their mission.
Mine now.
This man will follow orders, but not at the cost of innocent lives. He cares when he doesn't have to. The well-dressed man, now disguised in Ukrainian CORD SWAT gear, escapes into the sewers via the service tunnels, escorted by the American agents. John and the now well-dressed Big Nose...
Hey, your nose going to be 3 foot wide across your face by the time I finish with you.
You pipe down.
splinter off to look for the remaining bombs. As John locates the last explosive, he feels a gun at his back. Instead of begging for his own life, he pleads for the lives of others.
Don't have to kill these people.
John then sees a bullet hole reassemble as the bullet flies backwards out of the wall, clipping his shoulder and then killing John's would-be murderer in the process. The inverted bullet returns to the gun it was fired from as the music reverses.
Can I get a rewind?
The inverted round reverse exits the inverted weapon, and as he runs off, John sees something hanging from the backpack of his saviour. When you're in a military unit, it can be hard to pick out your backpack from dozens of similar looking bags. This particular soldier has a trinket attached to a red string that individualises it. We'll circle back at the end of the video for the deeper meaning.
That wasn't one of us. I'll take Bill.
John and Big Nose
Listen, I'm only telling the truth. You have got a very big nose.
put the bombs in the bag as John hookshots it into the evacuated VIP booths. They outrun the explosion and get back to the Ukrainians' van.
Profile. We're getting meanings of words. Low profile. Hey, Richie, how's your hand? It hurts like a fucking son of a bitch, Sam. Thanks for asking.
The Ukrainian assets know this isn't the well-dressed man and that a switcheroo has taken place. Plus, they didn't see his entire face in the van earlier, but they know that fucking nose anywhere.
Think about it.
We cut to some time later on a railway track where John and Big Nose are being tortured.
And don't pick your nose.
I wasn't going to pick my nose. I'm going to thump him.
The Ukrainian driver starts ripping their teeth out with a pair of pliers. The time on the clock approaches 6 PM and John is told to spare himself the agony, as all he has to do is give up his teammates, the well-dressed man and the location of the safe house before they get clear of the villain's grasp by 7 PM. This guy then finds John's secret cyanide capsule that's issued to you by the CIA just in case you get captured. Two trains on opposing tracks pass each other, representing the A and B sides of the time tape. John won't snitch, so this guy goes in his mouth again.
I'm your dentist, and I get off on the pain I...
At 7 minutes to 7, this sadistic fuck reveals that he's been playing with John. He says the clock's running fast, rewinds it an hour, implying that the rest of the team were captured and killed an hour ago. His colleagues never got clear. John sees Agent Big Nose with a spare cyanide capsule who's probably hiding up his nostril,
What was that? I don't know. I was too busy talking to Big Nose.
essentially saving him another messy mouth invasion.
Here I come.
Knowing he'll continue to be tortured for information he'll never divulge, he dives forward on his chair, biting down on the cyanide capsule, self-terminating.
It's got a poison capsule. Don't bite down, you son of a bitch. Who sent you? I want a name. Give me a name!
Any secrets John had died with him, thus our journey begins. Don't worry, the rest of the movie isn't a dream or on some Jacob's Ladder purgatory shit. He wakes up out of a chemically induced coma in a medevac at sea, only to find her
Suicide pill.
was merely a fake and the price of admission.
Your might.
Congratulations, son. You made it. You passed the test. You're in.
In the distance, an icebreaker ship sails past them. We'll get to that later, but for now, new character unlocked. Recruited. He wakes up with a sore mouth and to someone saying,
Welcome to the afterlife.
as far as the records are concerned, John is officially dead and has now become the man with no name. Faye gives him props for not being a snitch.
We all believe we'd run into the burning building, but until we feel that heat, we can never know.
He tries to resign, but Faye's all like,
You're dead, Willie.
he gets told to check his feelings at the door. Faye informs him that we're in the middle of a cold war and it's cold as ice, and even knowing too much can fuck things right up. This being a spy movie, this is knowledge divided. He arms the man with no name with nothing more than a hand gesture.
Oh boy, I usually only get this excited when they say the title of a movie in the movie.
It's a gesture in combination with a word. Tenet.
He said it! He said it!
Unbeknownst to both men, this security question is actually a gesture that can be understood by someone that's travelling forwards through time and someone travelling backwards. A forwards and backwards finger bang. He's told to use this combo carefully and to watch his back door. The word tenet means a principle or belief that's held by a group of people without any evidence, aka faith. He gets told that national security is so last year and that this is all about survival. He accepts the mission and they drop him off at a watery windmill where he stays for a couple of days as turbine maintenance. He thinks about all the shit he's just been through, gets all stressed out and tries to get them gains in. Here we see him doing chin-ups which are like pull-ups but the grips are inverted. We'll get to that later. He later gets picked up and taken ashore with the rest of the maintenance staff on rotation. Once ashore he does the friendliest GTA ever with the car left there by an asset. He gets to the location, tries to enter the training room, but it's locked. This pregnant, spunked-in scientist says that with a high-vis jacket and a clipboard, you can get in almost anywhere. So he interlocks his fingers and says...
Man, I'm scared of Tenet.
He said it!
Security question answered, agent authenticated.
Use it carefully. It'll open the right doors.
She keeps letting blokes in her front door. Before he even gets a chance to say anything, pregnant Bab says, I don't want to hear your life story, mate. Legs open and mum's the word. And all Mr. No Name needs to know is...
We're trying to prevent World War III.
New character unlocked. Pregnant Babs here is essentially Tenet's version of Q from James Bond. She brings him before the shooting range at the armoury, gives him an empty gun and tells him to pull the trigger. He then sucks the bullet out of the wall.
Don't be violent with it now, just suck it.
An empty shell casing flies out the tray on his right into the chamber of his gun, just as the bullet reverse exits the barrel. He then checks the magazine as instructed and proceeds to find the unfired round. In the background on the whiteboard is a diagram of the wall that the bullet just fired out of. Upon closer inspection, you can see it's the equation for Maxwell's demon. With lead-lined gloves on to protect herself from inverse radiation, she does a bullet catch.
Can I get a rewind?
She gives him the glove, tells him to have a go, but he's really shit at it.
He won't even try a bloody bullet catch.
She records it all. She plays the tape back to him, revealing that no matter which way you play the event, forwards or backwards, he made it happen, just by interacting with it. But to our eyes, the bullet just reacted in reverse because it's travelling backwards in time.
Rewind!
Palindromic in nature, if you rewind this entire event, she took the bullet from the table, loaded it into the magazine and gave it to him. He then fired the gun. The bullet entered the wall and then the shell casing landed in the tray to his right. He leaves and they never meet again. As he tries to wrap his head around what's just happened, she says, don't try to understand it, feel it.
Don't think. Feel.
Some people think this is Nolan's way of saying, I don't know what the fuck I'm on about, so please just go with it.
He's making it up as he goes along. No, I'm not.
But what he's actually saying is the average person doesn't understand inverted quantum physics. So instead of wasting precious time trying to get your head around it, you have to just go on gut instinct, on belief, on Tenet.
Which is an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world.
Like the viewer, he decides to just go with it, and thus, he starts to become good at it. We get a quick montage of him doing multiple bullet catches.
This is just your run-of-the-mill daring spectacular bullet catch.
Once you know, it's actually very obvious.
You will never get this. You will never get this. La 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 la.
I'm trying to understand!
Nonetheless, she tells him the bullets came from India. So he gets on a plane to go see Sanjay Singh, who turns out to be the biggest arms dealer in Mumbai. As soon as he touches down, he sees for himself that Sanjay's penthouse is patrolled by armed guards. So he gets on the blower, spits his twilight bars, and someone on the phone that he trusts sets him up with a point man.
You've had a squeeze.
He gets told to go to the Bombay Yacht Club where he can meet his contact who can get him in and out of there. It's here we meet... New character unlocked. After a quick introduction, Neil asks him if he's the type of ruthless agent that will take a woman or a child hostage. Neil orders a G&T.
Chicken, looks good.
And orders a Diet Coke for...
Mysterio.
Diet Coke break, Diet Coke break.
Because
Mysterio.
don't drink on the job like Neil.
You got to get liquored up to do your business up in here. Mysterio.
Says he prefers soda water. Neil happens to know this isn't true.
No trust. Liar.
Because it appears he's already studied his case file and done his homework on what's-his-face. In a shot straight out the Dark Knight, they decide against parachuting when Neil comes up with a little spy-fire contraption called inverse bungee jumping.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. All right. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
Once over the balcony, Neil uses his silencer to take out a guard and 00 negative here just chokes one out.
James Bond 007, not double negative.
He then puts the gun to Sanjay's head and starts his interrogation.
We'll try this again. Why are you people doing this?
Guns are never conducive to a productive negotiation.
What does that mean? You just don't understand.
I'm trying to understand!
Since they've only got a 10-minute window, Neil babysits the curry-eating cavalry. While Sanjay's wife tries in vain to call them for help.
Mysterio
gets all impatient and goes to pop him in his Ras Clark because he saw Lord of War. But before that happens, Sanjay's wife does a secret handshake on what's-his-face.
You've had a squeeze.
New character unlocked. Turns out Sanjay's got his balls in his wife's purse because she's the one wearing the trousers under that sari. She's the arms dealer in this inverted relationship, which makes Sanjay the boss's wife. She slaps her husband on the arse and tells him to fix a drink for the man who just had a gun to his head.
Relax, bitch, you better see that.
And you wait, you fucking wait. The first time that dude opens his mouth, you watch all these feminists throwing me. You shut the fuck up. You shut the fuck up. It is her time now.
It's her time.
So while Sanjay does the washing up like a good little boy, she reveals that her name is Priya and that this is her operation. She tells him the man he's after is Andrei Sator and that when she sold him the rounds they were perfectly normal. She believes that he's functioning as a broker with posterity and communicating with future generations by using texts and emails.
The question is, can the future speak back?
What's-his-face is aware that Sator is beefing with Moscow, but wasn't aware that the Siberian gas oligarch had anything to do with inversion. Priya tells Blankman over here that since he has no file, no record or no name, and is a complete mystery man, she has chosen him to get close to Sator and find out what he's up to.
To get anywhere near Sator would take a fresh-faced protagonist. And you, not fresh as a daisy.
She dubs our hero the protagonist. Their 10-minute quickie over, she promises him she'll get him in contact with someone in British intelligence that Sator hasn't got his claws into. The police turn up, so Neil and the protagonist jump over the balconies, releasing their spy-fi tech just before they hit the ground and disappear into the crowd. Our boy gets on a plane, zips over to London and gets himself a cheap suit by Brooks Brothers. He arrives at a swanky hotel to meet Priya's contact, but gets stopped by this jumped-up maitre d'.
Hi, my name's James Bond. Oh, fucking is it? Oh, he's such a twat though, isn't he? Like her. Yeah, no wonder you get into so much bleeding trouble, mate. You're asking for a spanking now.
This guy's got a face like a smacked arse because it turns out he's just done 20 years inside. 2 decades ago, he started following random strangers around and it got him into a spot of bother. Anyway, he's out now, he's blagged himself a job and he begrudgingly tells the protagonist, "If you follow me, Uno reverse card." On the way over, he asks the stalking steward if he can get a little bump off him and he says, "No, this is my cocaine." Get it? My cocaine?
Oh, fuck off.
New character unlocked. When the protagonist meets Sir Michael Crosby, their first encounter is so important we're going to circle back to it in the very last video.
Started to doubt you. Hope you don't mind. I'll catch you.
Sir Crosby here begins to debrief the young agent. This role makes Michael here essentially James Bond's M.
I thought M was a randomly assigned letter. I had no idea it stood for...
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
They discuss their target, Andrei Sator, an Anglo-Russian who's protected by British intelligence in exchange for sensitive information that he's managed to acquire. The protagonist is told that 2 weeks earlier, while the Kiev rock siege was taking place, a detonation in northern Siberia at a nuclear testing site was spotted by an MI5 satellite. It zoned in on the abandoned city of Stars 12 in northern Siberia, where Sator emerged from the map with money, power, and enough influence to get in with the British establishment no matter how much Sir Michael tried to dissuade them. He then hands the young agent something that smells like powerful, sexually aggressive old men.
You're carrying a Goya in a Harrods bag.
His name is Muhammad. He got the big winky. He got the nice face.
Dirty old bastard.
He's very famous for that. Really? Well,
But I digress. MI5 intercepted a Goya forgery from an embezzler that they apprehended.
It's a fake by a Spaniard named Arepo.
A man that likes to blow in his own trumpet.
I still haven't found anything I can really use. I gotta find an approach, a way in. Here we go.
The protagonist is to use the painting as a bargaining chip to blackmail Sator's wife Catherine Barton into arranging a meeting with her husband. Sator, being a power-mad, paranoid megalomaniac, this is no easy feat.
Nah, I don't have Snapchat. I'm not easy to contact. I'm old school like that. Yeah.
This fake painting is one of a pair and was authenticated at Shipley's by Catherine Barton herself. She got in an office romance with a repo and he used her to defraud a buyer. Unfortunately for the pair, the buyer turned out to be her husband. Let's just say he wasn't too impressed.
Alright, calm down, relax, start breathing.
Start breathing, man. You just caught your wife cheating.
Wait, what if there's a good explanation for this?
What? While you at work, she's with some dude trying to get off? Forget getting divorced. Cut the
They don't know about a repo's dick, but what they do know is 1, she's shit at her job, and 2, when she gets dick drunk, she can't see the bigger picture. Get it?
Oh, fuck off.
At the end of the briefing, Sir Michael gives him a right dressing down and tells him if he's going to go undercover into the world of international espionage as a supposed billionaire mover and shaker, then quite frankly, he needs to up his game.
You dress like shit? We got Gucci, Armani, another Gucci, tailor-made. This is what you need to get to the top today. Not dressing like Disco Santa Claus. You need charisma. You look like my Uncle Greg. Very nice guy, but he's a dentist.
But don't worry, Sir Michael Crosby's also a very nice guy and he hooks him up with unlimited funds to get the job done by any means necessary.
Never leave the
cave without him.
Now, with unlimited funds, he gets kitted out and starts hanging around a school like Philip Schofield. He watches Catherine Barton kiss her son Max goodbye as he gets in the car with his au pair Anna and driven away by men in her husband's employ. He goes to Shipley's where she works as an art appraiser, and when he meets her, he nearly breaks his neck looking up at her because she towers over him. You've heard of 50 Cent, right? Well, meet 50 Foot.
That's a huge bitch!
He hands her the rare Goya painting, and as she starts examining it, two people in the background cross each other on the stairs travelling in opposite directions.
I totally get symbolism.
She turns her pants into a fudge factory when she asks where he got it from, and he says Thomas a repo.
Oh, have I got your attention now?
Just the name of repo makes her need a drink, so they go to the restaurant in Shipley's.
What do you say we go somewhere else?
That's a huge bitch!
And on their first date, he tells her that he picked up the painting from an irate Swiss banker and traced it back to Thomas a repo. It's one of a set and her husband has the other one. He knows they're both fakes and that she appraised them. He tries to use this information to blackmail her, but she says her husband already knows. She reveals that her husband's a control freak and bully and uses the painting to control her and threatens her with prosecution if she tries to leave him. She even admits she tried loving them again when they were on their yacht in Vietnam. 2 weeks ago, this being the exact same time as the Kiev opera siege. He insinuated she was a shit mum and then she stormed off. When she later returned with Max, she saw some slag jump off the side of the boat and she hasn't seen her husband since.
You know how I dream of just diving off that boat?
When he's literally stunned at the amount that they spend on their holiday, she puts two and two together and realises he isn't as rich as he says he is. She knows he didn't speak to a repo in person or on the phone because he's upside down in the ditch somewhere sucking on his own dick. He exploits her hatred for her husband and offers to take the painting and the prosecution that he holds over her head out of the equation, in exchange for her arranging an introduction. Sator's main man Volkov and his henchmen turn up and interrupt their dinner, so this bad man slips her his number and gives her a little kiss.
Well, I guess that's one way to go.
The henchmen clear the kitchen while Catherine gets escorted out by a driver. The henchmen then escort the protagonist into the kitchen to give him a tenderising with an actual tenderiser.
Well, come on, boys. Isn't this what you always wanted? A piece of Tuck Pendleton, huh?
Cool as a cucumber, he says.
I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago.
How is that funny? Can you tell me? Because I don't get
And
it.
just as they go to batter him, he flips the Uno reverse card on them and absolutely fucks them up, turning up the heat in their own kitchen. Then he grabs a cheese grater and turns it into a field weapon.
Greatest in the world. Greatest in the world. Oh, my
beautiful face is ruined. I saw him shave a man with a fucking cheese grater. Who the fuck can do that? Henchman number 2 gets the second environmental takedown when he gets treated like Priya's husband and hit with the fucking dishes. He preserves his strength, doesn't break stride, and ducks the punch from the big guy. He then bangs him out the back door harder than P. Diddy did to Meek Mills. Cat's driver sees this and then speeds off into the night, I assume, to get this man his fucking hot sauce. Thanks to Sator, Cat has limited access to her son. The next day before he gets driven home, he says to his mum that he's going to Pompeii with his au pair, a nice little nod to the origins of the TENET Square. When Max gets driven away, a frustrated Cat calls the number that the protagonist gave her, only to find the cunt stalking her and right behind her.
Oh, you kind of snuck up on me there.
I am very, very sneaky, sir.
I see that.
He says to her what no childless man should say outside of school.
He's a cute kid.
Surround sound. I didn't know being an audiophile was a crime.
What a file?
Whoa. That just means that he is a connoisseur of high-end audio equipment.
She brushes off his Nazi comment and replies,
Is everything.
She tells him that if he wants to paint in, it's at a Freeport in Oslo, where Sator named his bonded warehouse Rotas, which is his name backwards, another reference to the TENET Square. She reveals that Sator used her contacts as an art appraiser to amass a client list of wealthy investors who can store their art and antiquities there without paying any tax on it because it hasn't officially entered the country yet. She tells him that her husband doesn't give a shit about art, but he does frequently visit the Freeports. So our protagonist deduces that the Freeports in Oslo are where the inverted bullets are coming from. Armed with this new information, our time agent contacts Neil, and together they plan a mission impossible.
And you really think we can do this?
We're going to do it.
Neil goes to the Rotas Freeport undercover as a wealthy investor. Once there, the tour guide shows him around and Neil gets an outlay of the place. He checks the cameras, the exits and the security protocols. He's also informed that in the event of a fire, a client's investments won't be damaged. Some people think that the music's overpowering there, but that's exactly the point. The music represents Neil's focus as he drowns out most of what the guy is saying and just focuses on the details of the Freeport. One of which is that they don't use sprinklers, they use halide gas that fills the vaults. The gas displaces all the oxygen in the room so that fires can't thrive. In the event that this does happen, the staff are given a 10-second warning to get out into the corridors before they suffocate. Neil is assured that if he does use the private bonded Rotas warehouse, then anything that he puts there will be safe and secure.
Safe.
He gets shown the private VIP entrance that leads out onto the airport runway. Whilst looking at the bays where the private planes go, he sees shipping containers going from Oslo to Tallinn. Neil reveals he discovered that in the event of a fire, the place goes into lockdown and the inner doors go back to factory settings and pickable locks. Unlocking these locks is no sweat off Neil's balls because he is the master of unlockment.
Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
So Neil comes up with a plan.
Not gonna like it.
A diversion.
You want to crash a plane, but not from the air. No, it's so dramatic.
He wants to hijack a plane, run it off the taxiway and use it to breach the outer wall of the Freeport and start a fire triggering the lockdown.
Well, how big a plane?
A 747, palindromic in nature, as it reads the same if you look at it forwards or backwards.
That part is a little dramatic.
It's here we meet Mahir. New character unlocked. And Mahir is played by Damwa from EastEnders.
His action speaks that word.
His team will hijack the plane. It's a Norsk freight flight carrying gold, not passengers. They plan to neutralise the armed guards, inflate the emergency slide to throw the pilots off on the move, use a grenade to blow a hole in the back of the plane so the gold bars fall out. This will create a distraction while Mahir drives the plane into the Freeport. Mahir says that if his team are caught, it will be assumed as terrorism, but since they'll leave 0 casualties, it will result in a swift extradition where they can get lost in the system and the whole event will barely make the news. Together they study the blueprints of the Freeport. Unbeknownst to them, it's designed as a pentagon to stop you coming into contact with your forward self. The pair do breathing exercises whilst running drills on the theft that they're about to do, as holding their breath will be a key component due to the halide gas. Neil wants to know what they'll be looking for, but the agent keeps him on a need-to-know basis and just tells him to bring some lead-lined gloves just in case the items are radioactive. On the night of the heist, they both turn up at the Freeport posing as clients. The breach goes as planned and the cowardly tour guide runs off to save himself and leaves our guys to suffocate. They both hold their breath and then use breakaway pieces from their briefcases that are revealed to be lockpicks. Once inside the Pentagon-shaped vault, Neil feels there's someone inside with them. They find 2 doors leading to the same room. Neil goes in the red forwards room and the protagonist goes in the blue backwards room. Inside they can both see that the proving window has bullet holes in it and that there's gun smoke in the air. A dismantled gun lies on the floor of the blue chamber.
What the hell happened here?
It hasn't happened yet.
At that moment, both turnstiles activate and an inverted antagonist jumps out at the protagonist and seemingly attacks him. Simultaneously, a forward antagonist runs out of the red chamber, brushes past Neil and runs out of the red room. During the struggle, the protagonist sees the gun reassemble and starts moving his head side to side like that cat that Mike Tyson trained, trying to avoid the inverted rounds coming out of the glass. The protagonist then stabs the assailant in the arm with the lockpick, and every blow he throws at the inverted assailant gets blocked.
Can I get a rewind?
Neil chases the forward guy and grabs his helmet. Upon seeing a friendly face, he lets the guy go free.
You've had a squeeze.
Our protagonist attempts to interrogate the inverted assailant as Neil runs in to stop him from killing the guy, because then the Freeport will know that they've been compromised. The 747 jet engine blows up outside and the explosion sucks the inverted antagonist out of the room. Our hero is pissed that Neil just witnessed inversion and asks him what he did with the other geezer. And Neil responds by saying, "I took care of him." They lay down and play dead as the paramedics come to the rescue. Neil has just witnessed something top secret and he's grateful to the protagonist for not taking his life for knowing it.
Well, I've seen too much.
He warns Neil that Priya will kill him if he knows too much. So as far as Neil's concerned, this is all about plutonium, but he lets him in on the fact that this is a cold war and it's temporal.
Time travel.
No. Technology that can invert an object's entropy.
Neil drops some knowledge on him and says that this is like Feynman and Wheeler's notion of electrons and positrons moving forwards and backwards through time. He also reveals that he has a master's in physics, which makes him conveniently useful to the protagonist. Afterwards, our hero reports back to Priya with what he's found. With her security close by, she tells him that the Oslo plane crash made the papers. He tells her that inside the vault they found 2 antagonists, one inverted and one regular. And she reveals that the inverted one was from the future, and if they both emerged from the turnstiles at the same time, they were the same person. Priya tells him that the technology to invent the turnstile was actually given to Sator by the future. She also lets him know that in order to get close to Sator, he better have something that the Russian wants, namely the plutonium-241 that his mercenaries lost at the opera siege when they tried to intercept it from the CIA team in Kiev. Luckily, the Americans passed it to the Ukrainian services before they themselves were captured and killed. She informs him that the Ukrainians will be moving the plutonium to Tallinn in a week, so he must hijack the item and use it to leverage the situation without losing it. The spy doesn't like the risk of having weapons-grade plutonium anywhere near the arms dealer and suggests just killing the Russian bastard. But Priya orders him that Sator must stay alive so that they can find out his part in the inverted attacks. She reminds her young agent that a bomb that could kill millions is nothing compared to what Sator could do if they don't stop him. She doesn't tell him too much and keeps him on a need-to-know basis. All he needs to know is that we are being attacked by the future and that Sator is somehow helping. The protagonist later on meets up with Kat and tells her that he took the painting out of the equation by destroying it, essentially freeing her from her husband's clutches. She agrees to arrange a meeting between him and her husband under the cover story that he's a US diplomat with a big dick.
Oh, I guess that's one way to go.
As they walk along the dock, she fills him in on the details of her husband's lair. And instead of letting Volkov take her back to her husband, he drops her off in his very own speedboat he just bought on a company credit card.
Never leave the cave without him.
As he drops her off, he looks up and sees our villain's silhouette staring back at him. On his way back to shore, he sees Volkov and is all like, "Oi, you got my fucking hot sauce?" Sator wastes no time and starts grilling his wife.
Who's the American?
She says her little toy boy is a diplomat for the US Embassy.
He seems nice. I invited him to the dinner.
Good with fists for a diplomat.
She asked where their son is and he said he told Max since she was busy with 00 Ding Dong he should just go to Pompeii with his au pair. That night at dinner when he's getting patted down by Volkov, he drops a line from Leap of Faith.
Whoa, gee, Lowell, you could at least buy me dinner first.
Sator don't waste no time and asks,
Just tell me if you've slept with my wife yet. No.
I for one would like to see an inverted sex scene.
Not yet.
Uh-oh.
God, you can't tell him that. They'll cut your balls off.
Just for that, Sator's going to have Volkov take him up the road to a walled garden, cut his balls off, cut his throat, and then take his balls and stick him in his throat.
You have balls. I like balls.
The undercover lover quickly brings up the opera, revealing that the situation with his wife is just a clever ruse to get close to him in a savvy way in regards to the lucrative item that surfaced at the opera house. They agree to discuss this in private when they go sailing in the morning, but before our man leaves, he goes full G and kisses the villain's wife right in front of him.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
The next morning at breakfast, Kat starts giving it.
You seem spirited today.
But she gets put back in her place really quick when he serves up the drawing for breakfast. He was notified about the breach at the airport by posterity who saw it in the public records. She's super pissed at the agent when they pick him up. Two boats sail parallel to each other representing the twin timelines, whilst the good guy and the bad guy shift from left to the right side of the boat to control its direction. This scene was like talking to someone in a rave.
See that shit coming out of their ears? They can't fucking hear you.
While sailing and talking on closed-circuit headsets, they discuss the origins of the plutonium weapon that surfaced at the Opera House. This, coupled with the roar of the waves and the sailboat, ensured that the conversation can't be eavesdropped on. Our hero pitches pooling resources to steal the item when it's being transported from Tallinn to a nuclear containment facility by the Ukrainians that acquired it. Just as they're hashing out to find the details, Sator's wife's anger gets the better of her and she casually tries to murder her husband. Yep, thanks to her impulsiveness, the mission is now in jeopardy, so the agent grabs the wheel and does a quick U-turn. To Kat's surprise, he dives off the boat to save her husband, seemingly protecting his investment. Back in the villain's lair, she's double pissed at him now, one for saving her husband and two about lying regarding the drawing. He basically says to her, "Look, I use bitches, it's my thing, but I had to get close to you because your husband's super fucking dangerous." He gives this murderous adulteress his gun just in case shit pops off with her husband. She hides when Volkov knocks on the door and says that Sator wants to see him. To protect Kat and stop Volkov from coming in, he uses quick thinking and says, "I ain't got any pants on, so unless your boss wants to see my dick, he can wait a minute."
I'm big boned. I'm heavy structure. I'm hung low. If I pull my shit out, this whole room get dark. Kick it! You don't understand. I ain't scared of you motherfuckers.
In his private chambers, our villain, who's obsessed with his health, is getting checked over by his doctor. On his desk is a model of a tiger made out of gold. In return for saving his life, the protagonist asks that he doesn't beat up his wife. Sator gives him a vague monologue about his origins at Stars 12 and the dangers of radiation poisoning. The villain then agrees to join forces and steal the plutonium from the Ukrainian convoy. Kat hides the gun in her bedroom and Sator comes in to give her a hiding. He slowly puts cufflinks into the holes in his belt to shit her up. The terrified wife begs him to let her go, to which he replies,
I can't have you. No one else can.
But her beating gets interrupted because he gets a delivery of inverted gold flown in. His men fly in with an inverted capsule they've just dug up out the ground. The henchmen are rocking red tops and blue jeans. When the time spy is sneaking around the villain's lair, he sees the inverted gold for himself. He also sees what Sator does with anyone who gets sticky fingers around his gold.
Sticky fingers, licking off for hip-hop. Sticky fingers, licking off for hip-hop. Sticky fingers.
The protagonist gets clocked and gets a well overdue beating from Volkov. On his knees, he gets interrogated by Sator, who demands to know who he is and how he knows about the opera.
Interrogate him in the Russian manner.
The villain knows the Twilight bars and spits the first half, but the protagonist, even though he's on his knees, he thinks on his feet. He says he loves those movies and he's Team Jacob. On his knees, he stands his ground and says he ain't having Volkov on his team when they hijack the plutonium from Tallinn. Sator lets him go and advances him the funds by throwing him a gold bar covered in that guy's brains. He uses the blood on the gold bar to collect a soil sample.
Handle the plutonium better than that.
As he gets led away, you can see Volkov laughing. How'd you like that hot sauce, you saucy little cunt? Shortly after, Neil and the protagonist discussed that the soil sample that was found on the gold bars was radioactive. The gold is dug up near nuclear containment facilities and he leaves correspondence for the future in its stead. Posterity receives it and digs it up immediately, then buries instructions for Sator so he can proceed with knowledge of the future. On the day of the heist, they try to do everything as analog as possible so they don't leave a digital footprint. This hopefully will keep the events out of the official record so posterity can't react upon it. Sator picks up Kat and takes her to the Freeport. As she enters the red entrance, she sees through the fence of the blue exit one of Sator's men in an Audi SUV with a mask on. Unbeknownst to Kat, this man is inverted and waiting for instructions. The Russian starts threatening his wife, so she pulls the gun that the protagonist gave to her on him. He says to his wife, "Alright, you might have pushed me off a boat, but you ain't angry enough to pop me in my rascal cart."
As anger scars over into despair.
He compares himself to the ferocity of a tiger as he beats the shit out of his wife. He then gives her a kicking on the floor for good measure. Side note, the scene where he kicks her in the stomach while she's on the floor was actually cut from certain streaming services. With just a few seconds cut, this completely fucks with the palindromic timeline of the movie. With attention to detail, you can see that he's wearing a navy blue suit, she's wearing a red dress, and there's a ramp in the room so you can drive a car into a vehicle-sized turnstile. These inverted machines are much bigger than the ones that they found at Oslo a week ago. Those turnstiles were only fit for inverting people or weapons. Sator then leaves his wife winded on the floor and then waits by the turnstile for instructions from his men regarding the step-by-step of the heist. Once he knows, he can invert and go backwards through that event. With knowledge of the future, he can then change the outcome of the event before it even takes place. Outside, the heist begins and the convoy carrying the supposed plutonium gets boxed in. 3 large trucks under Neil's radio command pincer the convoy. The protagonist, now disguised as a member of the fire department, doesn't see the BMW's wing mirror crack as a result of an event about to happen. Sator's red team, led by Volkov, are following closely in the Subaru, ready to relay any information they can back to Sator. Our heroes in the BMW then step on it to catch up with the fire truck up ahead. And just as the secret agent boards the fire truck, the heist music begins. And if you're wondering why the drums sound all backwards, that's because the composer isn't dropping the beat, he's catching it. The fire truck pulls alongside the convoy, creating a 3-dimensional pincer in space and time. It's crunch time, so Neil counts down from 5 and this signals the exact halfway point of the movie. Now this doesn't work palindromically if you cut out Sator kicking his wife while she's on the ground. Proving 2 things: 1, preserve physical media, and secondly, sometimes bitches need to take a kicking. Just kidding.
Those was jokes!
With the convoy now pincered in, the surrounding trucks jam the radio in and out so the convoy can't call for help. In the convoy control room, they see that the radio's down but the truck's still moving, so hey ho. Our heroes use a fire ladder to set an explosive charge on the roof of the convoy. After detonation, he climbs into the convoy, blasts the inner doors open and retrieves the item. The end credit song, The Plan by Travis Scott, starts to creep into the movie's score. A random police car rolls up and sees the heist in progress and then gets shot at by Neil's team. This now puts the event into the public record so now posterity can react upon it. They speed off in the Beamer and as the protagonist opens the case, he sees for himself this is not plutonium. It's the same MacGuffin from the opera siege and Neil tells him it doesn't matter if it's plutonium or not, it's what Sator's after. Neil speaks Estonian but doesn't understand what Sator's saying over the airwaves because the radio chatter's backwards. If you play it forward, Sator says, "The piece is in the Saab, make sure he's dead, get the algorithm from the Freeport." At that moment, an Audi SUV inverts backwards at them, clipping their wing mirror, causing it to reassemble.
We're off to the supermarket, we're off backwards all the way. Bit specialist, lad.
We then get treated to a backwards car chase straight out of License to Drive.
First works, Dad.
Let him drive backwards.
As the inverted Audi SUV rolls up alongside them, the back window rolls down, revealing Sator with a gun to his wife's head. He insinuates that he's going to shoot Kat in the face on a countdown of 3. At that moment, the good guys see a crashed silver Saab upside down in the middle of the road flip upright, reassemble and get in between the 2 vehicles. The protagonist then sees a familiar face driving the silver car, so he bounces the empty case off of the front of the Saab into Sator's SUV and with a sleight of hand he throws the MacGuffin into the inverted Saab. The The inverted blue team of bad guys leave Kat screaming in the car speeding backwards whilst they escape in a Merc driven by Sator's forward hired goon. The pair decide to save Kat instead of going after Sator, and in the scene straight out of Speed, our hero jumps into the runaway vehicle and saves her by hitting the brakes. Realising he's been duped, Sator then throws the empty case out of the car. Volkov and his boys roll up in a Subaru and ambush him. So Neil calls in the cavalry whilst the protagonist and Kat are kidnapped and taken back to the Freeport. The goons drag our hero into the red forward entrance, and as he looks through the fence he sees an inverted Sator drag Kat into the inverted blue room and put an oxygen mask on her. A proven window with a bullet hole in it separates the group during the interrogation. From the protagonist's point of view, Sator sits her down, removes his oxygen mask and interrogates the secret agent in regards to the item's location through the glass in reverse.
Stay with me.
You're not telling the truth. She dies.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Neither did my mate Dean Areno in the Hive, so I'm going to break it down for all you fucking numbskulls out there. In the normal time red forwards room, the agent can hear the reversed blue room's interrogation played forward. This conversation creates a bootstrap paradox. Let's break their dialogue down into pairs. The protagonist says his lines in chronological order, and Sator's separate lines of dialogue are reversed in sequence.
If you're not telling the truth, she dies.
The good guy's baffled because he hasn't actually said anything yet.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Then Sator asks a question that absolutely shocks the shit out of the protagonist.
You left it in the car, not the fire truck, right?
Now our hero's thinking that Neil's a double agent and he's been double-crossed.
I told you that!
He didn't see the sleight of hand, but he knows too much. The next question that inverted Sator asks is to confirm the exact location of the item that the protagonist is about to give him.
Tell me now, is it really in the BMW?
He tries to play dumb and buy time.
I don't know.
But something's about to happen that's going to force him to tell the location of the irradiated item.
Tell me or I'll shoot her again.
But to the people in regular forward time, the shooting hasn't even occurred yet. The good guy gets angry,
Leave her alone!
whilst the bad guy gets impatient.
I don't have time to negotiate.
Gunsmoke gathers as the blood-stained bullet hole starts to reassemble.
Listen to me.
The countdown begins.
3.
Our man tries stalling him.
I can help you.
Wife tries to pipe up, husband's all like.
Relax, bitch, you better see that.
The countdown continues.
2.
Our hero feels as helpless as Kat and starts begging.
Don't!
Countdown complete.
1.
Do that shit. Shoot that bitch.
Sator then attacks his 50-foot woman and shows her that his pull-out game is still strong. His next words come close to blowing her mind.
This one's a bullet to the head.
Our man tries one last haggle.
No!
Yes, 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 yes.
And as he goes to shoot her again on the count of 3.
1, 2, 3.
You buckle like a belt.
Okay.
But since he can't actually verify where it is, the protagonist lies about its location.
The car. The BMW. I left it in the
We're going to
BMW.
check this is real.
Regular forward Sator then emerges from his hiding place as the protagonist tells one last lie.
It's in the glove box.
Now, normal forward Sator has just heard his inverted future self ask all the right questions to discover that the item is in the glove box of the BMW. With time running out, Sator needs to make sure. This scene is reminiscent of Le Chiffre torturing Bond when he was whacking up his balls.
I like balls.
Which vehicle did you leave it in? I need to know before I go out there.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
I already told you.
Sator sees his inverted self in a blue room about to reverse exit the machine.
What the fuck's your backup?
But just as he goes to give one last bad guy monologue, Neil and the cavalry called for backup come in shooting. They kill 2 of Sator's henchmen while the third runs into the red turnstile chamber with his boss retreating into the B side of the time tape, seemingly disappearing from our POV. When the good guy asks where the bad guy went, the leader of the cavalry tells him.
Fast.
We then get treated to Sator's point of view when he inverts himself and comes out the blue turnstile. Now safe from harm on the B side of the time tape, he can now invert back through the interrogation that's just taken place. Since his future inverted self extracted the information, now he's inverted, he now knows what to say so that his past self in the red room can hear what he now knows. From the viewer's perspective, he heard himself in the future saying the right thing, so when he inverted, he just made sure to say those things, keeping the palindromic nature of the event intact.
We're going to check this is real.
He unshoots her and the bootstrap paradox takes place.
Tell me now, is it really in the BMW?
Told you that.
Indeed, from the protagonist's point of view, in the red forward room, the good guy heard that the item was in the BMW, not stashed in the fire truck, from the bad guy. But the inverted Sator was going back through the conversation, so from his perspective, the bad guy heard its location from the good guy first. We, the audience, saw the conversation simultaneously from both sides and know that our hero didn't say anything about the BMW until the bad guy revealed that he already had been told.
Paradox.
From the B-side's perspective, Sator unshoots his wife, interrogates him, removes her mask, pushes her back out of the Freeport. The henchmen put her back in the SUV where she'll be joined by the protagonist, who will end up speeding forwards down the highway. But let's back up a bit. During their kidnapping, Sator retraces his step back through the event to the BMW and realises that the protagonist lied when he finds the glove box empty. If you look, you can see Neil in the background, uncalling the cavalry whilst under inverted gunfire. Back in the Red Room, the protagonist is pissed at Neil because he thinks that him or most of his team must have talked due to Sator knowing every move that they made. The leader of Priya's backup team's name is Ives. New character unlocked. And Ives tells him that no one from the team talked and Sator is in fact running a temporal pincer movement. The protagonist reveals that he lied about where he hid it since Sator couldn't actually verify its location. Lying being standard procedures. When he sees Kat on a stretcher with an inverted gunshot wound, instead of just letting her become collateral damage, our hero goes off script and learns he can save her life by inverting her, thus stabilising her wound. The only other turnstile they know about is in Oslo, which by now has beefed up security, but didn't a week ago when they breached it. Ives explains the rules of the proving window to the protagonist as they all climb in the turnstile with Kat and invert. Now they're on the B-side of the time tape, they stick Kat in a large shipping container going from their free port in Tallinn to the one in Oslo and fill it with a week's supply of food, water and oxygen. The protagonist is insistent that he's going back out there into the past after Sator to stop him from killing Kat just in case it makes her disappear in the shipping container. Like in Looper. Neil warns him that that's unknowable and what's happened has happened. If he goes out into that past event, he could end up playing into Sator's hands. Ives tells him,
That's some cowboy shit. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into if you go through that door.
Since they can't change his mind, Ives says,
Wheeler, briefing.
Nice little tip of the hat to Fireman and Wheeler. Wheeler here is played by Fiona Dourif, who's literally the seed of Chucky. New character unlocked. She briefs him on what to expect, tells him not to come into contact with his forward self and tells him to bring his own oxygen.
Regular air won't pass through the membranes of inverted lungs.
He takes a listening device to plant in the empty case that Sator threw out of the car when he discovered he'd been duped. Just before he goes through the sealed doors out into the public inverted, Wheeler tells him to take a couple of seconds to find his bearings. His very presence will be pushing against the environment, light will be bouncing away from his eyes and every sound he hears is going to be a constant reload. When he asks if he can drive a car, Ives shouts out, "Cowboy shit." So the protagonist decides to just go because every second that he wastes, Sator gets further away into the past. Once outside on the B-side of the time tape, everything from his POV is in reverse.
Can I get a rewind?
With the wind pushing at his back, he runs towards an empty Saab with the keys in the ignition. He gets in the silver car that's been conveniently inverted and left there for him, and retracing the steps of what just happened, he remembers his former self just threw the item into the Saab. He checks the back seat and like magic it's there. He has trouble with friction and wind resistance, but he drives backwards through the event whilst normal bystanders witness what looks like an asthmatic lunatic reversing at high speed towards the highway. He stops where Sator threw the empty case out and puts his listening device inside it. He waits for a couple of moments and then the case bounces backwards into Sator's car, travelling backwards through the timeline. Our hero hits the gas in hot pursuit as he can now track him and hear what Sator's saying. He can now listen to a recording of Sator's conversation just before he tossed the case. He catches up with him on the freeway and positions his Saab between Sator's Audi on the left and the BMW on the right. The inverted protagonist makes eye contact with his past self in the passenger seat of the BMW as the radioactive item starts to bounce around in the back seat of the Saab before flying out of the window back into the BMW and the hands of his former self. The second time around, attacking backwards through the event, Sator now sees the sleight of hand, so now he knows that the item was in the Saab and when. He throws the empty case, bouncing it off the Saab back into the BMW where it came from. He then grabs the wheel and rams the SUV into the Saab, causing it to flip upside down with the inverted protagonist inside, leaving him dazed and confused whilst his oxygen mask falls off. Inverted Sator continues to threaten Kat to the forward-moving Beamer's occupants so that they don't clock that Sator knows that the MacGuffin will end up in the back of the Saab outside the Freeport. Now from Sator's inverted POV, he's the one getting chased by our heroes in a BMW. The bad guys spin the Audi around, clip the Beamer's wing mirror and head back to the upside-down inverted Saab as the suffocating time agent is gasping for air. As he's scrambling to get his mask back on, Sator says that he saw the handoff this time around and that this pincer's been even better than sex with his wife. He throws a lighter as he walks away like a G and the gasoline ignites. Our inverted hero starts to feel extreme cold as ice forms in the Saab as a result of reversed heat transfer due to the chemical reactions on the inverted object pushing against the environment.
You can look but don't touch, 'cause I'm cold as fire, baby, hot as ice.
He leaves our hero to die, then fucks off in the SUV, relaying the instructions back to his henchman over the radio. This is the backwards radio chatter that Neil and the protagonist heard at the beginning of the chase. The beast is in the Saab, make sure he's dead, get the algorithm from the freeport. Luckily before the henchmen get there, Ives and the cavalry rescue him from his freeze-mobile and stick him in the shipping container to Oslo with Kat. Now to finally complete the time pincer, Sator's man in the past at the freeport walks out to the silver Saab before the chase even takes place and retrieves the final piece of the missing algorithm Sator has been tasked to find. Temporal pincer complete. They can then assemble it with the other 8 pieces that he has acquired over the years using similar pincer moves. Inverted Sator and his henchmen then drop off Kat, who is not inverted, at the freeport. From Sator's perspective, this is the end of the story with his wife. But for Kat, who can only experience events moving forward, this is her being picked up after her kicking. But then from her point of view, she'll still be taken hostage and have the SUV chase plus taking an inverted round still to come.
He still has hell to look forward to.
Once the 9 pieces of the inverted radioactive item are configured, the henchmen can transport it to the hypercenter back in Sator's abandoned hometown of Stars 12, ready to be buried in a dead drop for future generations to then dig up and activate.
This thing is going to fire particles around it down 2 tubes in opposite directions. Now, the thing is, the spectrum for success for this experiment ranges from nothing will happen when they switch it on to a black hole. That is quite a large margin of error. Nothing, switch it on again, switch it off and on again, to apocalypse.
Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now?
Hey Colony, this is just a hobby at the moment, but it could be something else one day. So if you are enjoying this breakdown, hit the bell, like and subscribe to keep the hive alive, and make sure to leave a comment because it helps me in the algorithm.
And it does actually take some skill and some research and some knowledge. You have to learn it forward and backward before you can explain it in a very easy to understand way to your audience.
Our hero wakes up in the shipping container looking like a burrito. While Kat lays drugged up on a stretcher, Neil tells the protagonist he may be the first person in history to get hypothermia from a gasoline explosion. He's told that Ives and his team rescued him from the wreckage and cleaned up the scene. Just imagine being a bystander, seeing a bunch of soldiers grab a guy covered in ice and then throw him into a car before it unexplodes. He confesses and tells Neil that he fucked up and handed the MacGuffin to the bad guy on a silver platter shaped like a Saab. He's got mad trust issues because he actually thought he recruited Neil, but it turns out Neil's been a part of the super secret organisation before they even met. And Neil's like, yeah, lying is... Standard procedures. Neil divulges a little bit. He says he doesn't work for Priya, he was actually recruited by someone else, but unfortunately you're on a need-to-know basis. Neil tells him when this is all over, if we're still standing and you still care, you can have my life story. They both know even if Kat survives her inverted gunshot wound, she'll be killed by Priya for knowing too much. From their POV, the shipping container they're in is travelling backwards in time 7 days to Oslo to the breach of the freeport. During the course of this week, it's Neil that mainly looks after Kat. He tends to her wounds, he gives her a crash course in physics, and during this time they tell her all about inversion and all the top secret stuff that will explain all the backward shit she's been seeing. From Tallinn to Oslo, Kat basically gets debriefed and recruited while she drifts in and out of consciousness. During this time, the protagonist's right arm starts to hurt as he listens to the recording of Sator talking about the algorithm. Neil, who clearly knows more than he's letting on at this point, reveals that the section that they lost was one of 9. When assembled together in the right order, it reveals a mathematical formula that only future scientists will understand. It's been rendered into a metallic form so it can't be communicated or copied. Once assembled and sent into the future, they can use this formula to emit inverse radiation from a turnstile instead of containing it. Now, because time and entropy flow forward like a stream, it's like we live on a conveyor belt constantly moving forward. But because Sator keeps inverting objects and people, the 2 directions of time become intertwined. Neil explains the 2 directions of time intertwining by locking his fingers. And this is the first time the protagonist has had an explanation for the forwards and backwards finger bang. Now, because the wind of entropy naturally flows in our direction, anything inverted is constantly swimming upstream, pushing against the environment whilst going against the grain and pissing in the wind. The mathematical formula that is the algorithm can change the direction of the entropic wind and the conveyor belt that we all live on. But with the world inverted, in theory, none of us would be able to breathe, which means us, their ancestors, would die, which brings us to the grandfather paradox. If you went back in time and killed your grandfather, how could you ever have been born in the first place to commit the act? So theoretically speaking, if they killed us, they would destroy themselves. But as I mentioned in my previous Tenet video, the Greta Thunbergs and Leonardo DiCaprios of the future, suffering from a lovely little mixture of god complex, hubris and desperation, vote on turning back time in a last-ditch effort to save the planet. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that we must succeed because we're here to talk about it. So what's the difference? Why are we even bothering?
I feel like I've already won.
After all, what's happened. Neil points out that's a nice way to look at it, but the flip side of the coin could be that our dickhead descendants in the future already succeeded. And the moment that reality was destroyed, our consciousnesses branched off into the multiverse of reality. We were never the prime timeline. We could all be products of an alternate world in a tangent universe. You know, like in Dark, The Butterfly Effect, or Donnie Darko. You see where I'm going with this. Them, me, even you, dear viewer.
We are not what was intended.
You were never meant to be.
After dropping a theoretical nuke in the protagonist's brain, Neil's all like, alright, night, try and get some sleep, mate.
Don't have nightmares, sleep well.
The dream has become the reality. Who are you to say otherwise?
The shipping container that they've been in for a week, which must fucking stink by now, gets put on a truck and sent to the Oslo airport. Their container gets dropped on the runway instead of getting taken inside the Freeport due to security being on high alert and a 747 sticking out the wall. They decide to use the chaos and confusion after the breach to enter the Freeport. Our hero's wound in his right arm gets worse. And as he gets suited up, he realises there's a tear in his suit exactly where his wound is. The cut then gets worse and starts pissing out with blood. But with time running out, they get suited up and push Kat out of a container filled with inverted piss and shit. While Kat lays monged out on the stretcher, Neil waits outside of her and the protagonist goes to check to see if the coast is clear. At that moment, the engine from the 747 explodes and the force pushes our hero under the folding doors into a confrontation with his past self.
No, you don't understand. All this mess, all this debris, this is from a fight we're about to have. On Rumble!
In this big reveal, our main character literally has to fight past who he used to be in order to proceed forward. Knowing that this fight doesn't end in a fatality, he simply goes through the motions. He blocks every move, making sure their flesh and particles don't come into contact. His sound and vision are distorted, but as long as he has faith in the situation, it doesn't matter how many times they use the force, or appear to because you kick the gun out their hand. You're both basically immortal. A week ago, he thought he was fighting one of Sator's men, but now knowing the truth, he just retraces his steps back towards the turnstile. And this next part's gonna hurt.
Are you alright? My black eye, it's gone. Just shot that off my face with his finger.
The pain in his arm becomes super intense as he's unstabbed with a lockpick.
Just uncrack me ribs.
And to neutralise the last threat in the room, the inverted antagonist then tries to empty the clip in time with his past self's head movements. So with his signature move that we saw at the Opera House, he dismantles the gun in one quick move, making sure the gun can't even be used in the fight anymore, checks the proving window for himself to reverse exit, the inverted antagonist dives into the turnstile, he disappears from side B, re-emerges on side A of the time tape, and sprints past Neil. Neil catches up with him and grabs his helmet again. And that's why when he saw a friendly face, he let him go. Proving he was being honest, because when he's later asked what he did with the other guy, he says, I took care of him.
That's what I'm talking about! That's what he's doing to me!
It's just as well the Rotas faults are shaped like pentagons, otherwise there's a massive possibility he could have just run straight into himself. Reverted back to normal, he runs through the folding doors, sees Neil and shouts, go! He runs past them, sees an ambulance and masks up. In disguise, he does a not so friendly GTA and gives the paramedic a knockout punch. Now, because Kat and Neil are both still inverted on the B side of the time tape, what Neil saw was his bro sprint backwards out of an ambulance, then call him an OG, and jump backwards through the folding doors of the Freeport. Neil knows OG means go, so he wheels Kat on the stretcher through the vault, just as the halide gas is sucked back into the pipes and the room fills with oxygen. He pushes her through the bonded warehouse and out into the corridor. And this was the presence that Neil felt the first time around.
There's someone in here with us.
Inverted Neil spots the suited up past version of himself and the protagonist gasping for air, and he waits for them to rewind away from the turnstile. Neil checks the proving window and sees himself putting his mask on and loading Kat into the chamber like a bullet into a gun. They both revert back to normal and come out the other side of the time tape, and Neil takes his mask off.
Help you breathe more easily.
The protagonist waits outside in the ambulance behind the plane, waiting for Kat and Neil to re-emerge from the Freeport. Now all three are united in the ambulance. They drive past the inverted versions of themselves about to get into a shipping container filled with piss and shit.
You have to learn it forward and backward before you can explain it in a very easy to understand way to your audience.
The protagonist says, hey, when you pulled off my helmet, promise that's the last time I'll say that, if you knew it was me, why didn't you warn me? Look, mate, it would have really blown your mind if I'd have told you you were about to shoot your future self in the head. Not knowing the future is our natural state of being. With what's at stake if you told someone their future and they chose to use their free will to go off their predetermined path, who knows? Existence itself could be destroyed in that very moment. Neil told him he knew he'd be alright because what's happened has happened. He also reveals that the policy of the organisation is to suppress information or any proof that contradicts the illusion of free will. If we have indeed already won and are here to talk about it, we need to just go on gut instinct, on belief and on tenet. Neil assures him they are the people saving the world from what might have been. No matter how confident you are of the outcome, you can't just sit it out. Can't get caught slipping just thinking you'll be alright. You gotta play your part as if you didn't know any better. Because when time finally runs out and we have to fight the future, ignorance is our ammunition. I mean, I for one wish I didn't know that the past versions of our heroes are somewhere in a shipping container right now sucking piss into their penises and literally taking a shit. With their side quest complete and their mission successful, they park the ambulance in their underground car park. Kat's inverted radiated wound that would have just got worse over time has now been reverted and has now got the chance to heal. But Sator has the algorithm piece and they don't know where or when he is. They have no idea what point in time he reverted back to. Our hero tells Neil he needs to get in contact with Priya and tell her to get her ass to Oslo. Because at this point in their chain of events, in 2 days time she's going to send his past self on a mission to steal supposed plutonium which turned out to be the 9th piece of a mathematical formula for a doomsday device. It was knowledge divided. Neil says you can't change any of that, it already happened. Protagonist says hold my reeb.
What? Our reebs. Bears. That's what we used to call them when we were kids. It's beer spelled backwards. Shit.
When Priya gets to Oslo expecting to meet Neil, she's surprised and confronted by a man from the future, who thinks he's ahead of her. When she asks where Neil is, he says that Neil's looking after Kat, who nearly died because of you and your mission that you sent me on that I failed. Priya's like, fuck Kat and don't tell me you lost the plutonium. And that's when he reveals his hand that what he actually lost was the 9th piece of the algorithm.
All this is James Bond. Need to know time.
She proceeds to debrief him with information that she got from the anonymous leader of the organisation that she's never met in person.
A history of things to come.
She tells him in the future, generations from now, scientists discover inverse radiation. Then some old lady scientist who's an expert in this field screams, Eureka! She devised a method for inverting not objects or organisms, but the entire environment around us, emitting inverse radiation instead of containing it. The super woke eco warriors of the future think this is a great idea to rewind events, where those in power and the elite class can just live on the B-side of the time tape with a lifetime supply of VIP air. This scientist tried to warn her peers that switching the direction of the time tape would not only break every law of physics, essentially making effect come before the cause, but she also takes a second to remind them about the potential consequences of the grandfather paradox. And since she invented this device, it makes her essentially her generation's Oppenheimer. During the Trinity test at the Manhattan Project in World War II, Oppenheimer became convinced that the chain reaction from his atomic device could destroy the world. They went ahead, pushed the button and got lucky because Armageddon didn't come to pass and neither did Judgment Day. But they did kickstart the arms race and the threat of nuclear holocaust. Cut from then to a couple hundred years in the future and food, water and resources are scarce due to the rising blight that's depleting all the oxygen in the air. With pollution, global warming and the threat of nuclear war in front of them, those in power vote to invert inversion and turn back time, believing it's the only way they can save the world. Our super woke great-great-grandchildren filled with DiCaprios and Thunbergs are all like, fuck our ancestors, they're the ones that got us into this mess in the first place. And while we're at it, fuck the grandfather paradox because it's probably all just a bunch of theoretical gobbledygook. The scientist, who in a sense is the future's inverted version of Oppenheimer, doesn't just push the button to see if they get lucky. She disobeys, rebels and defects. Traitor! She doesn't let her plans be known to anyone and continues her work. She completes the mathematical formula for inverting existence, but under the fear she's being watched, she can't just destroy it. Those in power will just be able to invert and go back and get it before she destroys it. So she splits the algorithm into 9 pieces and then puts them together in no discernible order. She then inverts those 9 pieces and herself and then escapes into the past. Her master plan is to hide these 9 pieces of the inverted algorithm in 9 separate locations in the worst places on Earth where no one would ever want to go find them. I mean, unless you're living in Fallout, who chooses to go to nuclear containment facilities near radioactive hotspots? This was tricky because each location was on high alert due to their security being breached by inverted government men that were recently looking for her in the algorithm. Their boss, the man in the crystalline tower, doesn't know exactly where she's hidden it, but he's guessing radioactive hotspots. We'll get to that in the next and final video. She managed to bury each individual item around 9 different separate locations around the globe, undetected, each piece buried further in the past than the last. And with all 9 pieces inverted and buried, going backwards in the chronology of the world's timeline, she sets the treasure hunt in motion motion on blind faith, hoping there are those in the past that do not want our antagonists in the future to succeed. She then took her own life so she couldn't be captured, tortured and forced to make another weapon of mass destruction. In the future, as time went on, posterity, led by the man in the crystalline tower, looked back through the history records and find that a young man named Andrei Sator landed a contract recovering pieces from a nuclear warhead that had exploded at ground level in Stars 12. The future chose Sator because he was there at the fall of the Soviet Union.
Most insecure moment in the history of nuclear weapons.
So they invert a capsule for him full of gold, knowledge of the future and instructions. These instructions include how to build a turnstile. Posterity gives Sator the means for wealth beyond his wildest dreams in exchange for him locating all 9 pieces of the algorithm for them.
I'm prepared to scour the earth for that motherfucker.
He asked Priya to warn his former self in 2 days' time so the cat doesn't get hurt and Sator doesn't get away with the algorithm. But she reminds him of their organisation's mantra, ignorance is their ammunition. His past self, who she's going to meet up with in 48 hours, is still on a need-to-know basis. If he knows too much, he can fuck things up. The protagonist is actually shocked to find out that Priya used him. She wanted the protagonist to acquire the item and then lose it to Sator so that he could then compile all 9 pieces that he had together and they would all be in the same place at the same time. So in 2 days' time, she's going to keep the past version of himself in the dark because if he knows too much, he'll never let the algorithm fall into the hands of Sator so they can get it with minimal effort. All assembled and ready for the taking. Only our hero knows that the hiding spot is most likely at Star 12, where Sator's men will seal it in the ground with an explosion that was spotted by an MI5 satellite over northern Siberia. And this all happened back in the past on the 14th, the same day as the Kiev opera siege. Our protagonist feels all used and dirty.
I was a fool, used, abused, turned out like a $2 hoe.
The protagonist used Cat, Priya used the protagonist, everybody's using each other and lying because lying is standard procedures. The policy is to suppress and your only protection is your own ignorance. He actually thought he was the main character of the story and she told him no, you are a protagonist. One of many responsible for saving this world. And our boss is from the future and a complete mystery, so we're all going on blind faith out here. But now you've involved Catherine Barton in some top secret shit, unfortunately she's a loose end and she has to be taken care of.
Take care of?
The protagonist feels bad for even involving Catherine in the first place, so he asks Priya to speak to whoever is in charge of loose ends and say that Kat and her son ain't to be touched.
Never alone.
She says, okay, I'll promise, but you know I lie all the time, right? So I'll give you my word, even though my word is worthless. If that tastes better going down, then it helps you sleep better at night. He insists, since he's the only one that knows where the algorithm's going to be buried, he's going to need Catherine on this mission. To get close to Sator back in the past when he weren't trying to kill her.
Wait, bitch, give me some chon-chon.
She's like, alright, keep your hair on, and tells him to get Kat and Neil to the rally point offshore in Trondheim, Norway. Because Commander Ives is waiting there with a battalion of soldiers on a ship with multiple turnstiles on it for fully automatic inversion. Rows of turnstiles sending multiple subjects into the past. The fact that we, the good guys, have actually got the technology that we're trying to suppress is actually alarming to the protagonist. But Priya tells him fighting fire with fire is dangerous, but it's much better than fighting fire with marshmallows. She also tells him to have a little more faith in humanity because there are people in the future that are unsung heroes just like him. They also want to continue the inverted algorithm's journey into the past, as they do not agree with the eco-wankers in the future that have gained power. There will always be groups of people that band together against systems of control that try to destroy us. They do it without recognition, acknowledgement or reward. Faith is key because the organisation that they're working for hasn't even been founded yet. TENET is yet to be created, but it will be founded in the future by a mystery figure. With the mission to save the world now a go, they get themselves to the rally point in Trondheim, which is technically its last stop. They then board the ship and invert with Ives and the rest of the team. And together the gang set sail into the past. The ship at Trondheim is called an icebreaker. It's a powerful ship designed to navigate through obstructed waters.
Just to break the ice.
It's made to create a safe path for those who follow. Kat, Neil and the protagonist invert themselves on the ship, and as we, the audience, approach it, we can see our hero with his oxygen mask on doing inverted chin-ups. A pull-up is the opposite of a chin-up, it's just the grips that are inverted. And pull-up is a palindrome as it's spelt the same forwards and backwards. Coincidentally, at this time period, his past self has just undone these exercises and is leaving the wind turbine on his way to be unrecruited. Now in their oxygen-filled quarters, Kat sits in amazement at the seagulls flying backwards. Just behind her, the windscreen wipers on the glass swipe backwards and forwards, just like our main characters switching directions in time.
I totally get symbolism.
He asks how she's feeling, and a murderous, angry, vengeful cat shows him a massive scar and a burning desire to kill her husband. If you look closely, there's a cheap bit of sailor art in the background. It reads, "Ships in the harbour are safe, but that's not what ships were built for." Meaning it is dangerous out there, but sitting here procrastinating and doing nothing while sitting comfortably is not the best way to get the job done. Our hero explains to the Black Widow over here that they can't just kill Sator. This is because he has a dead man switch that is linked to his fitness tracker in his heart monitor. If the fitness tracker stops detecting a pulse, it will send out a text or an email that will be instantly received by the future. And this message will contain the exact location of the dead drop and where the algorithm is buried. In layman's terms, his death triggers the weapon. You know, like in Spawn.
We're gonna rig a fancy smancy device that connects your heartbeat to the Heat 16 bomb. So if your heart starts ticking, the bomb goes off.
Nolan must have seen this terrible cult classic that I love and thought, as bad guys' insurance policies go.
Good idea, I like that.
And then Kat drops the bombshell that Sator has inoperable pancreatic cancer and is actually intending to end his own life, taking us with him.
If it can't happen, no one can.
It turns out that dealing in radioactive shit over the decades ain't good for you.
You lecture me about radiation. Andre Sator digging plutonium from the rubble of my city as a teenager.
So this evil little bastard just sold his soul for riches. He exchanged time for power and did a deal with the forces of darkness.
Hey, should only get cancer.
Yeah, he's only trying to send instructions into the future where it can be applied and activated, breaking the laws of physics to invert the laws of time, reversing the butterfly effect with a size 10 bootstrap, which will lead to the great-grandfather paradox. In theory, this wouldn't just destroy existence, it could create some kind of inverted black hole where existence never even existed in the first place.
And now look at yourself. You're not even a has-been. You're a never was.
So for trying to paradox existence into oblivion,
you'd only get cancer and die. That's wish.
Now for those who lean towards Christian mythology, if you prove God wrong, the creator of existence, and invert his decision, you would be instrumental in the devil's plan for the end of days. So technically, Judgment Day and nuclear holocaust would be avoided, and simultaneously Armageddon would be triggered courtesy of Sator and inverse radiation in the world.
What a cunt. He gets to choose a time and place, the end of the world.
Going on gut instinct, the protagonist remembers Kat telling him about a holiday to Vietnam on his supervillain's yacht. This was the last time in Sator's life that his wife ever made him feel loved.
That was my best time.
Yeah, but it was also the day he said he'd divorce his wife and let her go as long as she turned her back on her son Max and never looked back.
What a cunt.
I know, right? She said for that she got super pissed at her husband and called him a
cunt
and told him to fuck off while she smashed a bowl of red berries on the deck. Shortly after, she took Max ashore and Sator flew off in his little helicopter. When she returned to the yacht, her and Max both witnessed Sator's side chick diving off the boat. This is the day that Sator vanished, and while Kat's struggling to remember the exact date when he went missing, Neil interrupts her and reveals...
It's the 14th, 10 days ago.
Neil somehow knows that this was the day that Sator flew from Vietnam to the Ukraine.
How do you know about that?
And Neil's all like...
I don't know how to put this, but... I'm kind of a big deal.
And quite frankly, Mr. Protagonist,
it's all you need to know.
The point is, past Sator wasn't on his yacht that day, so suicidal Sator knows there's no chance of running into his former self on the yacht. So that is his window to go back to that golden moment and have it be his last.
Time is running out for him.
Time is running out for everyone.
The protagonist tells them that in order for them to succeed, they have to pull the algorithm out of the dead drop without Sator knowing. Because once Volkov triggers the bomb, collapsing the ground above it, sealing it in, he can then call suicidal Sator, who's just sitting on his yacht, who can then kill himself. This will stop his art triggering his fitness tracker. That will send an email burst into the future, disclosing the exact location of the algorithm, so mankind can open Pandora's box, inadvertently unleashing Maxwell's demon upon the world, thus destroying all of existence.
Mrs. Hell, I'm going to give you the guided tour. When you dance with the devil, you wait for the song to stop. Know what I mean?
When Neil asks the protagonist where the dead drop is, he gets told,
Knowledge divided, my friend. You're not going to tell me. Ignorance is our ammunition.
Uno reverse card. But he does tell Kat he needs her going on that yacht undercover as her past self. Infiltrate the vessel as soon as her past self storms off with Max and pretend she came back to make up and have a little bit of alone time with him. Give him a strip tease, a lap dance, a blowy, anything to stop suicidal Sator self-terminating. This makes Kat officially the backstop. meaning it's her job to provide a believable cover story. Her mission, and she better fucking accept it, is to keep Sator occupied while they get the algorithm out the dead drop.
I want you to go back in time.
Could mean that point in time inherently contains some sort of cosmic significance, almost as if it were the temporal junction point for the entire space-time continuum. On the other hand, it could just be an amazing coincidence.
Our hero puts his mask back on and goes up on deck. He then looks up and sees a Chinook helicopter carrying a blue shipping container that will be later used solely for extraction. The container gets set down on the icebreaker. Now the ship itself isn't travelling back in time, the inverted soldiers on board are. The protagonist sees Neil training the soldier how to drop his weapon, making it look like it jumped into his arms from an enemy's perspective. On deck, the conventional and inverted spar with each other, and the conventional don't need oxygen masks. Commander Ives tells him the ship is heading back to the 14th, but without knowing exactly where the dead drop is, there's only so much he can do to prepare.
One of those on a need-to-know basis things, is it?
Nah, it's definitely time to confide in Commander Ives. So the protagonist tells him that a hypercenter is ground zero for an underground nuclear test.
You know, because you need to know.
The agent tells the soldier that a Sir Michael Crosby informed him about a detonation that was captured by the MI5 satellite over northern Siberia in Stars 12 on the 14th.
Used for underground tests.
And that the explosion seals the algorithm in an underground tomb, which is the dead drop.
Need to know time.
So now both men agree that the algorithm has to be removed from the dead drop before the explosion seals it in. So to be clear, Sir Michael Crosby told the protagonist about the detonation in northern Siberia, and now inverted, working their way back to that moment, the protagonist is now telling Ives the exact location of where the detonation will unhappen. Ives knew what point in time they were going back to, the 14th, but now he knows where they're sailing back to, Starsk 12 in northern Siberia. The soldiers split into two teams and half of the platoon is inverted, and led by Commander Wheeler, they get airlifted back to the battle in their blue containers. Wheeler's team, including Neil, who are on a need-to-know basis, are told that in 50 minutes they will all enter the battlefield in reverse. They will engage the enemy in a 10-minute attack beginning at the end of the battle. They'll be dropped at the top of the ridge of the hypercenter, armed and equipped with oxygen masks, plus the countdown watches that count down from 10 minutes to 0, and blue team's job will be to lay down cover fire for red team who are just leaving the battlefield. This is because the conventional forward moving red team and the inverted blue team will operate this 10-minute mission simultaneously. Blue team's prime directive is to kill as many antagonists as they can and memorize as many details they can about the battle so Wheeler can get that information to Ives. From Blue's perspective, Ives is jamming with his soldiers at the end of the hour, and he can brief them on the exact details of the battle before they come off the chopper at the landing zone at the beginning of the 10-minute mission. So red team can now attack, moving forward, knowing everything. This will create the world's first bipaural time pincer move. The 10-minute battle takes place as planned, with something really significant happening at the 5-minute mark. And at the other end of the battlefield, red team are getting dropped off and come straight out of their choppers, laying covering fire for blue team and their wounded, as the inverted team get into their blue shipping containers for extraction before the countdown watches hit 0 and the bomb goes off. The survivors get flown back in their shipping containers, and from the ship's captain's point of view, these time warriors are coming back from the future. So there you go, dear viewer, you have just witnessed a brief version of future events, the detritus of a coming war. Now let's go back and see things from the point of view of our main characters in the present who we've been following through this entire story. After the time agent briefed the time soldier, they both went below deck with the rest of red team and got in the turnstile ready to revert. The protagonist sees Kat and goes to have one last word to say goodbye. She's already reverted back to normal and is in isolation in a perspex box. He seals him in and she lets one go. She asks where Neil is and he says,
He must have gone to her already.
She says she hates her husband for what he's doing, but she hates him more because he saw the look on her face when she considered his offer. A divorce and freedom in exchange for turning your back on your son Max and never seeing him ever again. Basically, she really fucking hates her husband and wants him double dead. Our hero reminds her that she's the backstop, and it's her job to stop Sator from killing himself while they execute their time pincer move and remove the algorithm from the dead drop in time. They must extract it without his knowledge.
Then you have my permission to die.
She doesn't really agree, she just stares at him blankly and he's all like, "Ho-ho." The little fella's like, "So let's be clear, I have a license to kill and you have a provisional license, okay?" He gives her a flip phone and says, "After this is all done and dusted, and you're off living a happy life with your son, if you ever feel threatened, hit talk, state your time and location and hang up." She may never lay eyes on him again, but someone in the future will look out for her. To thank him for saving her life, she bends down about 35 feet and gives him a little kiss. He tells her he's leaving now, but she should travel back another 24 hours in time so that Mahir can pick her up on the 13th, which will give him a day to smuggle her into Vietnam during their 60-minute window. Once on board, she needs to keep her husband busy by any means necessary whilst they extract the algo out the dead drop. Today is the 14th and Blue Team get dropped back on the icebreaker. They return with fewer numbers and without Neil, and Blue Team revert back to normal time with Red Team. This is where Blue Team members can go back in for another pass. And now that everybody's on the same page, we're going to revert back to normal time. Red Team come out the turnstiles below deck and get ready to board the chopper and fly to the battle. Blue Team back from battle revert back to normal in the turnstile and just wait on the ship, while the inverted version of Blue Team seemingly comes out of the turnstile and jumps back into the shipping container they came out of. The blue shipping container then gets hoisted up and dragged back to the briefing point they was at an hour ago. Wheeler then communicates the details of the 10-minute battle to Ives. She tells him they meet in the middle of the battlefield at the 5-minute mark and paradox the fuck out. She tells him they destroy a building forwards and backwards, but she leaves out the names of the dead soldiers. Okay, so we're ready for Red Team to jump off the chopper and arrive at Ives' briefing.
You got it? Yeah. Nah, I didn't think so. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing and you're handing out junk mail. Now get off my desk.
Final round. Fight.
Are you ready to begin?
They get told that Stars 12 is a city hidden away from the world where anything can happen.
And today, ladies and gents, 10 minutes, it most assuredly does.
The squadron's been split in half for a temporal pincer movement. The protagonist and his squad, led by Ives, are Red Team, increasing entropy, attacking forward, completing the 10 minutes from start to finish. They are the conventional unit, rocking red armbands to distinguish themselves. Out the window, you see the blue closed shipping container hiding the inverted survivors.
I don't think let us see them. Maybe we won't like what happened.
Not seeing who made it and who didn't is essential for morale. Can't have you acting differently now, as your ignorance is the mission's only protection. Ives tells them an hour from now Blue Team were briefed in this very tent. Now, because they've already survived the battle, the tips and tricks that Ives is about to give his team have the benefit of Wheeler and the Blue Team's experience. They've completed this level and have seen it all. The Inverted Jobs team is to clear the field in clarification. The Red Team's watchers start counting down the 10 minutes from arriving at the landing zone to the extraction just before the explosion. Blue Team experiences this event in reverse. Wheeler told her Inverted Team that if they don't reach the Red Team's landing zone by the time that their watchers hit 0, they weren't meant to leave the battlefield and die today. We focus on Neil as his teammates nod in agreement. Red Team, when they land, clear the landing zone of bad guys so Blue Team can be extracted. Because this worked, Red Team learned that the city was abandoned and were told that a Sator had the turnstile in the ruins.
That one.
This means that the Mad Russian has conventional plus inverted mercenaries, weapons and ordnance. Red Team must take out the ordnance immediately to ensure Blue Team's extraction. Wheeler's team spotted a tunnel that leads under the ridge of the hypercenter. The Red Team soldier asks how they meant to defuse the bomb at the top of the ridge that will seal the algorithm in if they know it already goes off. And that's when Commander Ives tells them that their mission is to be seen failing to defuse the bomb while Splinter Unit sneaks down the tunnel and steals the algorithm without Sator knowing, so that the bad guys think that they've won. And when some fucking dickhead asks who Splinter Unit is, he gets told,
Need to know and you're done. Any other stupid questions? Good, we'll discuss. Let's get ready.
Not wanting to get ridiculed in public, the protagonist goes up to Ives in private and says he wants to be on the first wave. Ives tells him there's no first wave, both teams are operating simultaneously and he needs to stop thinking in chronological order to survive. Ives whispers to him that Splinter Unit is just the two of them. The duo were tasked with retrieving the algorithm undetected from the tunnel before the bomb goes off, and anyone that's even seen the algorithm has to die. So when successful and the time has come, these two men have resolved have to end their own lives to save the world. Elsewhere at the exact same time, Mahir smuggles Kat into Vietnam. She uses the binoculars and sees her past self storming off the yacht with Max. Past Sator leaves in his little chopper he has below deck as they watch him fly off to oversee the Kiev opera siege. Mahir gives her a gun for protection but tells her until you see my flare go up in the air, you do not let him die. Again, she gives Man a blank stare and says fuck all.
Ho-ho.
She straps the spy kit to her ankle, Mahir drops her off, she dives in the sea and boards the yacht. She tells the staff she came back last minute to surprise her husband with an apology. A woman apologising, this film just jumped the shark. She sweeps up the broken berry dish, unhooks a couple of wire railings and hides her gun under the chair cushion. This bitch has been beaten, terrorised, shot and dragged backwards through time. She is pissed. Suicidal future Sator then returns via helicopter to his yacht that he thinks will be empty. He's surprised to see Kat there because he remembers her in the past storming off the boat when she went ashore with Max. She tells him Max is ashore with their au pair Anna and she came back to make up and have a bit of alone time with him. She tells him Max went ashore with the au pair and she's come back to make up with him and have a little bit of alone time. So Kat gets all flirty and pretends to love him like she once did. She plays all cutesy wootsy with him, keeping him distracted while they both pretend they're not from the future. Elsewhere, the 50 minutes is up and the 10-minute battle is about to begin. The conventional ordnance fire at the red team arriving in their Chinook and the inverse ordnance aim at the blue shipping containers meant for blue team's extraction. Red team get off the Chinook, laying down cover fire and destroying the ordnance. The protagonist pulls out the heater and gets cooking.
Cook any fools? Excuse me?
It's now safe for blue team to land, so they reverse exit the blue containers as red team's watches start to count down from 10 minutes down to 0 when the bomb goes off.
Yes, a ticking clock!
The protagonist then starts breezing into the battlefield like Tom Cruise was chasing him. Now as the movie's score starts to rewind, we begin to see the events from blue team's perspective. Wheeler tells her inverted team in the shipping containers to brace themselves as they're coming in on a shockwave caused by the explosion at the hypercenter. The bomb unexplodes and blue team run out to give cover fire to what's left of red team before they board their Chinook for extraction. Neil looks down at his watch and sees that his countdown has begun. Now back to red team's POV as they run past the turnstile's location and advance towards their objective. Whilst running at top speed, the protagonist shoots multiple inverted mercenaries that seem to appear out of nowhere. They then get trapped behind the wall and can't advance because of a sniper. But when the top of the wall they're hiding behind unexplodes with knowledge of the future, Ives knows where the projectile came from and what window Sator's inverted soldier was in. He commands the anti-armor unit to return fire, taking out the AT-4 before the guy even fires it. Pushing forward, red team is now a quarter of their way towards their extraction at the ridge of the hypercenter. Now from blue team's perspective, coming down the ridge of the hypercenter, they lay down covering fire, helping red team on their way out. Inverted Neil spots a Humvee reversing back down the ridge towards them. Neil shoots at the Humvee, but it's bulletproof and speeds past them while the rest of blue team just try to avoid bombs exploding and unexploding all around them. Back to red team, who took out the AT-4, who are now advancing with the environment being destroyed and reassembling all around them. Our protagonist then steps on a piece of debris that gets sucked back into the wall it detached from, which flips him on his ass in front of everyone.
Go!
There are girls watching.
All embarrassed, he brushes it off and proceeds with the rest of red team up towards the ridge of the hypercenter where the bomb is counting down, ready to seal in the cavern. At 6 minutes 40 seconds, the protagonist looks up and sees Volkov arriving in his combat helicopter. Red team then runs around this corner and sees this guy just chilling.
That motherfucker dead!
So he is. They then run into a large group of Sator's forces near the ruins of a large building. The film's musical score then inverts once again as we cut back to Neil and Wheeler's inverted blue team running down the ridge of the hypercenter after nearly being run over by a runaway Humvee as they work their way towards the ruins of the large building. Blue team, now a quarter of the way towards red team's landing zone extraction point, run into the lion's share of Sator's forces, conventional and inverted alike, whilst the abandoned architecture gets blown apart and reforms from different perspectives. Wheeler and one of her teammates take cover in a hollowed out wall of a destroyed structure. Neil witnesses the rubble on the floor next to Wheeler start to move and yells for her to get out. She takes his advice, but her inverted teammate, who is slow as fuck, gets sealed in the wall just as it unexplodes and reassembles.
Well, I guess that's one way to go.
Both teams are roughly in the same place and the protagonist spots the entrance to the tunnel leading to their objective. Ives warns him that if any of Sator's goons see them running towards the tunnel, then the mission will fail because the bad guys are also running the temporal pincer movement and will then know everything. The protagonist says we need a distraction, and Ives, still keeping him on a need-to-know basis, replies, "Don't worry about that." Ives, travelling forwards through time, was told by inverted Wheeler what happened approaching the 5-minute mark that gave them that distraction. At this moment, Wheeler, travelling back in time through the battle, looks down at her watch, beginning to count down to the 5-minute mark. Ives does the same simultaneously, and at the 5-minute mark, exactly halfway through the battle, both commanders order their anti-armor infantry units to fire rocket launchers at the buildings where Sator's mercenaries are concentrated. The blue inverted soldier fires a rocket at the base of the building, destroying it, but for anyone moving forward through time, this makes the bottom of the building seemingly heal and reassemble, while Ives' guy fires a rocket at the top of the building, destroying it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Now from the blue inverted team's perspective, this causes the building to heal from the top whilst they destroy its foundations. This insane level of paradoxical carnage fucks up a bunch of Sator's mercs and shocks the shit out of the rest of them. So to be clear, when two teams who were acting on blind faith fought side by side to defeat an enemy and met in the middle, the palindromic move gave birth to the organisation that they all already fight for. The battle was 10 minutes forwards and 10 minutes backwards. TEN spells 10 and reversed it spells net. Thus, the moment they met in the middle and intertwined, they became TENET.
Last time it was no tennis. Oh, that's why they call it that.
Back on the villain's yacht, Sator, who thought he was going to die alone, goes off script and now wants his family around him to enjoy one last perfect sunset before he ends our world during its twilight hours. He calls up his henchman and tells him to bring his son Max back to the yacht, and his henchman's all like, "Yes, boss, so bring Maximilian back with your wife immediately." Which makes Sator go,
"What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?"
But with more pressing matters at hand, Sator pulls out the suicide pill that his mem took from the undercover CIA team that he killed at the opera siege, which is also taking place at this very moment. But Sator doesn't know this pill is a dud. It won't kill him, it will just put him in a chemically induced coma. When Kat asks him what it is, he replies it's the way the world ends, not with a bang but with a whimper. Basically, when he takes this, it's all over. Undercover future Kat plays coy and stupid. She tells him not to end the world just yet because they got a little vodka left. A bit confused, Sator tells her that his henchman just said that Max was ashore with his mum, not his palindromic au pair. But even though she's sitting down, she thinks on her feet and roasts at Anna, saying, "Well, at least you can tell the difference." The couple cozy up to each other while pretending to be the past version of themselves.
Imitating some earlier time in our lives. He seemed happy.
We now cut back to the battle at the 5-minute mark with the building double destroyed and everyone thinking, "What the fuck happened?" Splinter unit made up of Ives and the protagonist now have the distraction that they need, so they run past everyone towards the tunnel heading underground to the hypercenter. As the duo approach the tunnel entrance, a Humvee starts chasing them, hitting the horn trying to get their attention. They ignore the driver's efforts, running into the tunnel, setting off a tripwire which in turn sets off an explosion. This seals them in the tunnel with no way back out. Fully committed, they proceed down the tunnel. Now if you look up, you can see drop down openings that would be impossible to jump up into, but are wide enough to drop down into. They're highlighted with a blue tint, remember this. Now at the halfway mark, let's rewind and see things from blue team's perspective. Inverted Neil looks up and sees Volkov's helicopter flying backwards. Neil follows it and sees it hover above the entrance to the tunnel. It's at the tunnel's entrance where he sees Volkov unplanting a tripwire and then grabbing a rope hanging from a helicopter and ascending into it like Batman using his grappling hook. Neil, being the only one to witness this event, goes on gut instinct and goes off script. He abandons the blue team, and as Wheeler screams at him to come back, he runs off towards Sator's turnstiles to switch gears. As he approaches it, in the distance you can see the future forward version of himself get out of a Humvee and run backwards towards the turnstile. Destiny! But he used his free will, never mind. Once inside the facility, he sneaks down the stairs. He takes cover as he sees enemy soldiers inverting and reverting, but he can't wait any longer as he sees his forward self, and witnessing him run backwards down the stairs towards the turnstile, he reverse exits the machine.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, I came from violence. It's in my blood. My dad had it. His dad had it. It's all just my fate. You believe in fate, boy? My fate.
Inverted Neil, still wearing a blue arm patch, gets inside Sator's turnstile.
Cyclone and 6 psycho, drinking spit nitro and sprint so quick I switch time zones.
And reverts back to normal conventional forward time in order to get back to the tunnel so he can warn Splinter Team about the tripwire that he saw Volkov planting whilst he was inverted. Now conventional forward Neil sees a Humvee, runs towards it and decides to do some Grand Theft Auto. So we get temporal carjacking before GTA 6, or after, depending on the point in time in which you're watching this. In the distance he can see his past self running backwards out of the turnstile entrance, undeserting his comrades and rejoining Blue Team. Neil pulls a tool from his utility belt and hotwires the Humvee. He goes all Top Gear and puts his foot down with 60 seconds to drive back to the tunnel entrance so he can warn Splinter Team before they set off the tripwire that Volkov planted before disappearing down the tunnel. Neil sees the protagonist and Ives run towards the tunnel entrance and hits the horn to warn them. He fails to get their attention. They run in the tunnel, setting off the explosion, sealing themselves in with no way out. He gets out the Humvee in frustration, is all like, Then he remembers the fact that in 5 minutes the bomb's going to go off at the top of the ridge and it's going to seal the algorithm in the underground tomb with his teammates who are going to be buried alive with it. Neil gets back in the Humvee and drives towards the ridge of the hypercenter. Back in Vietnam, an anxious Mahir gets impatient, radios Ives and asks him if he can let off the flare due to the mission's success. He wants to give Kat the green light to kill her husband, but while Splinter Team are still running down the tunnel, Ives shouts, "Not clear!" So Mahir puts his flare gun away and continues sweating buckets. In the distance on the yacht, future Sator tells future Cat to stop grabbing up his dick because he's got a quick business call that he needs to make. So while he's distracted calling Volkov, Cat sprays down the deck with water from a hose and squirts lotion all over the deck to make it all diddy party slippery. Sator calls Volkov, who's in the bowels of the hypercenter underground, ready to put the assembled algorithm pieces into a time capsule and drop it down a chute into a container that won't be affected by the impending explosion that's going to take place in a few minutes. Splinter Unit arrive at the scene at the end of the tunnel and realise that they can't go any further because they're obstructed by a reinforced gated entrance. And this gate has a lot too heavy duty to be damaged by anything that they have on them. On the other side of the gate on the floor, Ive sees a deceased member of Blue Team that Volkov must kill in a few minutes. Our hero reaches through the gate to search their dead comrade's backpack for C4, but the protagonist is caught off guard when he sees a trinket with a string attached to the dead soldier's backpack. At that moment, Volkov pops up out of nowhere and shoots through the iron gate, hitting Ives in the helmet and knocking him out. Powerless, the time agent just watches through the gate while Volkov gets back to work, and just to rub it in true Bond villain fashion, Sator, thinking he's about to win, reveals his dastardly plan to taunt our story's protagonist.
You got me monologuing.
Oh no, I've seen way too many Bond movies to know that you never reveal all the details of your plan, no matter how close you may think you are to winning.
Sator's all like, welcome to the crib, how'd you like where my story began and yours ends?
A little radioactive for my taste.
Sator says that's because you're a noob, a tourist, and when it comes to living in the fallout of a radioactive wasteland,
I was born in it, molded by it.
Cat's must be like Chernobyl by now because Sator's rod is radioactive! In his view, he made a deal with the devil and traded money for time. He gambled on his own future and lost, so before he turns over his cards and folds, he's gonna flip the table over before he leaves so no one else can play. Sator tells him he may have made a deal with the forces of darkness, but you fight for an organisation you don't even understand. No one on your side trusts one another, so much so that you don't tell each other anything, and when you do talk to each other, it's fucking lies. So I'm gonna bury you in here with the truth, and you can rest assured that because you failed, I'm taking everyone with me. He boils the protagonist and Tenet down to just a bunch of religious fanatics going on blind faith. Kat starts to feel anxious when she sees Max and her past self being brought back to the yacht. Cause if this kid is confronted with two mums and watches his dad kill himself as his mums get into a fight and he witnesses Mortal Kombat annihilation on an atomic level, well, let's just say he's gonna wish the fucking world ended, cause
you'll be having nightmares for a while.
In the most important phone conversation since Fireman and Wheeler, our hero argues with Sator and tells him that destroying the world is only something that a fanatic would do. The bad guy insists that he may be destroying our world, but he's creating a new one for the future and the people that he works for. He briefs our hero on what he was told by his future handlers, that when his mission is complete and his life has ended, his boss in the future, known as the Man in the Crystalline Tower, will flick a switch and activate the algorithm, stopping future nuclear war over resources by rewinding chronology, thus saving the planet while us, their ancestors, perish. So theoretically, to the future's eyes, Armageddon would be triggered and avoided simultaneously. Tired of paying for the sins of their forefathers who made the planet uninhabitable, the Man in the Crystalline Tower and the woke antagonists of the future have decided to invert inversion. So existence will be bombarded with inverse radiation from within the turnstile that the algorithm was applied to. In short, they're fucking dickheads.
I'll switch to reverse mode. 3 brought to life in bank raid. A masked man with a sawn-off shotgun sucked bullets out of 2 cashiers and a security guard in a South London bank tomorrow.
Sator asks the protagonist, look, since you know the world's inhabitants are going to die all slow and miserable eventually, are you sure you don't want me to just put them out of their misery in an instant instead of just dragging it all out?
Am I not merciful?
But the protagonist insists, yes, each generation looks out for its own survival, and Sator agrees, telling him that's exactly what his bosses in the future are doing, looking out for themselves. So since the planet's destruction is imminent and we are fast approaching the end of its life cycle, our light is failing and we're fading away. So unfortunately, we do live in a twilight world, and because the people in the future are trying to kill us, there are no friends at dusk.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Our hero doesn't buy it for a second.
Bullshit! You're a traitor. You're in a debt to all because you have no life of your own left.
Yeah, super selfish Sator even cream-pied Cat back in the day, knowing he was going to destroy the world that his son lived in. Sator wonders if God will forgive him for his sins, even if the little bastard is an atheist. As Volkov readies the time capsule to lower it into the dead drop, our hero tells the villain that if he doesn't believe in anything but death, you're not even human, you're just a madman. Sator's lack of belief is ironic because if he indeed has the power to destroy the entire world, it in fact gives him the power of a god.
Our time is up.
Tired of the protagonist trying to delay the inevitable and not leaving anything up to chance, Sator orders Volkov to shoot the protagonist in the head. Just as Volkov gets closer to get a cleaner shot, the body of the dead inverted soldier starts to twitch. The heavy-duty lock on the gate starts to unlock and the dead inverted soldier from our point of view comes back to life, steps in front of the protagonist and is unshot by Volkov. Now with perfect timing, the resurrected soldier locks the gate, thus opening it from our hero's forward perspective. The saviour seemingly pulls the gate open and stands aside while the protagonist runs through to stop the henchman from lowering the capsule into the dead drop. During their struggle, Ives starts to wake up and is all like, "What the fuck happened?" Ives snaps out of it and steps through the gate to pick up the gun that Volkov dropped when he got shot, only to get a surprise himself when the once dead inverted soldier steps out from behind the gate and locks them in with Volkov and no way out. The inverted backpacker then gets a new lease on life as he sprints backwards back up the tunnel, jumping up like a superhero out of the drop-down holes in the tunnel roof. Remember? The ones with the blue tint. The soldier disappears from sight as we see Neil in the background driving up the ridge towards the hypercenter as he's getting shot at by his inverted past self who's reverse exiting the battlefield, moonwalking towards his blue shipping container. At the LZ end of the battlefield, Wheeler gets her blue inverted team closer to the landing zone as the conventional ordnance reassembles and the gunner respawns shooting at Tenet's air support. Back on the villain's yacht, Sator wonders why his wife can't relax and keeps fidgeting. She's pretending she squirted lotion all over the deck by mistake and she's trying to wash it away now. So to distract the bastard, she walks over to him all suggestive-like and tells her husband to lay on his front because she's going to lube him up and peg the shit out of him. Back in the belly of the hypercenter, Ives can't get a clear shot while the protagonist fights with Volkov over the capsule. Our hero manages to gain the upper hand just before the cunt can pull the release cord. He turns up the heat and fucks him up in his own kitchen. He then throws the henchman down the chute meant for the algorithm. Now the future antagonist will dig up is a 7-foot skeleton. That's a huge bitch! Splinter Team then grab the case and retrieve the assembled algorithm from inside but have no escape route. Unbeknownst to them, Neil is reverted and is driving up the ridge to the top of the hypercenter. He jumps out, grabs the Humvee winch and proceeds to unravel it. We cut back to the yacht and Kat sees Max and her past self approaching. Now my hair ain't let off his flare, but Kat's had enough and she don't care. With time running out for her, Kat goes off script and ruins Sator's perfect moment by grabbing the gun that she had in her little spy bag and she tells him, "Surprise, cockpit!" She's not going to let him die peacefully on his own terms thinking he's won. She tells him he's dying alone and future Sator looks at his wife all confused. She isn't the timid little bitch he thinks she is who was so easy to scar internally. She opens up her shirt, but not to show him some titties, she does it to reveal her inverted gunshot wound and that she is indeed like him from the future. He once told her that anger scars over into despair, but while she was inverted, her despair unscarred into anger. She wasn't ready to shoot him in cold blood back in Oslo, but when he clocks he's been duped, he lunges at her and she pops a little ginger cunt in his rasclark. While he's gasping for air on the deck, she grabs his legs and starts to push him. With the lotion on his back and the slippery deck she set up, she turns his last moments into a slip and slide. She then pushes him through the wire railing she pre-detached. She slides him backwards off the deck, breaking his back on the lower deck railing and he belly flops to his death. Now it's just as well I didn't direct this movie, because if I had, this would be the moment she uses her newly acquired time powers to really fuck his shit up. When the crowd say ball, selector. Then she piss all over the deck and mop it up with her husband. She shit on the deck too. And he'll be like, "For God's sake, Kat." And Kat will be like,
"Now you tasted my mutton. How do you like it, huh?"
And the film would end with Sator falling into the ocean, jaws biting off his dick and a flare accidentally going off in Mahir's shorts. But Mahir gets on the walkie to Ives and tells him that Kat went off script, jumped the gun and killed her husband. With no way out and Sator dead, they think they failed the mission with 10 seconds until the bomb goes off. Neil then throws the Humvee winch with a rope attached down the hole that's set to explode. Neil gets back in the Humvee and watches the blue shipping containers him and his team arrived in unland and rewind back the way they came, as well as the Chinooks extracting red team survivors that seemingly failed to defuse the bomb at the ridge. At the other end of the battlefield, Wheeler joins the survivors of Blue Team. She has one last look for Neil before Blue Team's shipping container closes and they're airlifted out of there. Back up on the ridge, Neil hits the gas and drives forward, pulling the protagonist, Ives and the algorithm out of the hole with 1 second to spare as the bomb goes off. Back on the yacht, Catherine Barton does a little shot to celebrate, drinking to her husband's demise. She then removes all traces of herself from the yacht. Mahir speeds over in the boat to pick her up, and just before she goes to dive off the yacht to make her escape, she looks down and sees her son Max and her past self witness some slag dive off the yacht. Mahir bags up Sator's corpse and ties it to the back of the boat. Kat comes aboard, and as they speed off, Mahir hands her the radio and goes, "Oi! I think the boys want a word with you." The protagonist asks her, "Why'd you go off script?" Kat replies by saying, "I couldn't fucking help myself, but I had faith in you, my little big dick super secret time agent." Our hero tells her, "Thanks, Kat, and I never want to see you again. Stay safe, be lucky." Kat and Mahir sail off into the sunset with her husband's body in tow. This was the day of the opera siege, this was the day of the temporal pincer movement at Stars 12, and this was the day that Sator vanished. Revealing the sleight of hand and the distraction that took place, because when it came to the devilish Andre Sator, this siege was a blind for them to vanish you.
This finite life, this life with a beginning and an end, which is measured out in increments of time. Time is a medium of exchange. You can use it.
So I used my time to break it down in a thought-provoking way, because your average moviegoer probably just thought this.
I just all walk backwards while people are walking fucking forward.
Let's just pray time travel never actually becomes a thing.
That's an important line. You can't rewind and you can't go back.
Neil walks up to his comrades who are catching their breath. The time agent's surprised to see that Neil isn't inverted anymore, but he's grateful to hear that he switched gears just to help them. Neil, after all, was the only one that saw Volkov plant the tripwire at that moment. Ives got knocked unconscious in the hypercenter and didn't see how the lock on the gate opened. The protagonist says, "Wasn't me." When Neil hears the agent ask, "Didn't your team need you?" Neil replies, "I'll get him on the next pass." When they all stare down at the algorithm, Ives proves he's all about business, grabs it and points his gun at the pair. He reminds them that his orders are to kill anyone who's even seen the algorithm, including himself after disposing of it. Yet after a few moments of consideration, the soldier of duty in resolve goes off script and splits the algorithm into 3 sections. He gives a section to the protagonist and a section to Neil. He suggests that they all split up and bury their sections in secret, scattering them and continuing their separate journeys into the past. And once this is done, they should end their own lives so they can't ever be captured, tortured or forced to tell where their sections are buried. This was the day Ives used his free will to disobey orders.
You've had a squeeze.
He tells him he'll kill him if he ever sees him again, so don't procrastinate and let him find you, because he will look. The soldier's ignorance will be their only protection. Ives walks off towards the Chinook and Neil asks the protagonist if he's going to go back to London to keep an eye on Kat. He tells him no, as it would be too dangerous and an unnecessary risk. Neil just smirks and asks him, "What, not even from afar?" He knows the protagonist will say no because lying is
Standard procedures.
Neil then gives his section of the algorithm back to the protagonist and reveals that he's going back with Ives to the icebreaker where he can invert once again. Not to assist Blue Team in the past, that's pointless. He's going back in because he knows he was the only one that saw Volkov setting the trap. No other inverted soldier witnessed it, and deducing that Neil is the best locksmith on the team, he was the only one that could have helped them down in that tunnel. As he walks away, the protagonist sees something hanging from Neil's backpack, a trinket attached to a red string. Not just to individualise it, but to symbolise the belief. According to ancient folklore, 2 people can be destined to be connected by an invisible red string. The string may stretch and tangle, but it never breaks, eventually bringing those 2 people together. When the protagonist sees the red trinket, he realises that Neil isn't just a soldier that opened the gate and took the bullet for him, he was also the SWAT member from the opera house that saved him. "I took care of him." He pleads for Neil not to go, suggesting they can do something different on the next pass, but Neil tells him, "We just saved the world, we can't leave anything to chance." What's happened happened, which is an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world. It's not an excuse to do nothing. It's not an excuse to procrastinate. Ships in the harbour are safe, but that's not what ships are built for. They are the icebreaker, clearing the path for those in their rear view. Sure, this is Neil's fate, but he uses his free will to accept it. He tells our hero to let him go as he walks off. When the protagonist asks who recruited Neil, he turns back to him and says, "You did, years ago," revealing they've known each other for some time. It was years ago for Neil, but his friendship's still ahead of the protagonist. This is one of the reasons that Neil was the man who knew too much. Remember, he knew our hero's favourite drink was Diet Coke?
You never drink on the job. You're well informed.
It's the reason Neil's mind wasn't completely blown when he first supposedly witnessed inversion.
Time travel. You mean reverse chronology?
Why he conveniently had a master's in physics.
Like Feynman Wheeler's notion of a positron and electron, moving backwards in time.
Why he had security clearance to call in the cavalry that saved them.
I'm calling the cavalry. What cavalry?
It's why he had so much faith in people's free will.
Why didn't you say?
And he'll be okay.
It's reversing the flow of time. Doesn't us being here now mean it never happened? But we stopped them.
Optimistically, I'd say that's right.
At every stage, you've known too much.
Apparently Neil here knows more about it than I do.
He was in Ukraine.
At the Kiev upper siege. How do you know about that?
There's also a reason that he cared for Kat so much when he didn't have to, and why he knew the exact day that Sator vanished.
I went ashore with Max and he flew off, but I don't know what day it was.
It's the 14th.
The reason being is that Neil is Kat and Sator's son, Max.
Maximilian.
What?
Maximilian.
What the fuck?
But we'll get back to that when the protagonist says,
You've known me for years.
Neil replies with an inverted version of the line from Casablanca.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
For me, I think this is the end of a beautiful friendship.
But for me, it's just the beginning.
Now, there are some conspiracy fucknuts on the internet that think that when Neil said this,
We get up to some stuff. You're gonna love it.
what he meant deep down was this.
How can I be homophobic? My boyfriend's gay. Hitman in a bum, try see a man come car, even my dick is gay.
But it doesn't make any sense, okay? It's fucking stupid.
You'll see.
What actually happens is Neil decides,
This is James Bond. Need to know time.
and tells the protagonist what he should have guessed already.
This whole operation's a temporal pincer. Whose? Yours. You're only halfway there. I'll see you at the beginning, friend.
Neil then walks away and boards the Chinook with Ives and gets flown back to the icebreaker in regular forward time. Both blue and red team return back from the battle, and blue team returns without inverted Neil as they land on the icebreaker. Both teams return with wounded, fewer numbers, and instead of just returning to Trondheim when everyone had reverted back to normal,
Didn't your team need you?
Get him on the next pass.
he sneaks off without saying goodbye to his comrades.
Where's Neil? He must have gone through already.
He goes in for another pass and inverts again. He unboards the ship and gets in a blue shipping container, infiltrating his own briefing while sitting behind his past self. He re-enters the battlefield and drops down into the tunnel with the blue tint. He hides and waits behind the iron gate, and now, knowing everything, just at the right moment, he closes the gate on the protagonist, locks it, gets between Volkov and Splinter Team, and finally ends his loop in time by taking a bullet for his friend.
10 minutes, tops.
Time isn't the problem. It's getting out alive is the problem.
Once back from the battle and with everyone reverted back to normal, all survivors, including the protagonist, head back to Trondheim as this was the icebreaker's final destination. They get off the ship at the rally point discreetly so the protagonist's past self doesn't see him. His former self gets on the ship, inverts with the team and goes on the mission we just witnessed. Shortly after all this is done and dusted, the protagonist flies to London. He said to Neil he wouldn't go back to England to check on Kat, so not to endanger her ever again. Neil chuckles for two reasons. One, because he knows that lying is standard procedures. And two, because of the palindromic nature of their relationship, Neil may have indeed just given the idea to the protagonist that he should in fact check on Kat. Kat is considered a loose end by Priya just for knowing about inversion, and the boss bitch has been charged with tying up loose ends by her boss in the future. With Sator well and truly out of the picture, Kat goes to pick up Max from school. She sees a car parked up she doesn't recognise from the school run. She starts getting an eerie feeling like she's being watched and starts to feel threatened. Inside the car, Priya sits with her driver/hitman. She orders him to go and kill Kat quickly before the boy comes out. But at that moment, the rear door opens and our hero gets in the car, killing Priya's driver.
The silencer makes a whisper of the gunshot.
She sure looks surprised for a little Miss Know-It-All. He's like, "What's up, Priya? What you doing here? You promised you were going to leave Catherine alone." And she's like, "Yeah, lying is," and he interrupts.
Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
When Priya asks how he could possibly know that Kat was going to die today, he pulls out a phone, puts it on speaker and plays a voicemail that he received a while ago. The voicemail is from Kat and says, "Cannon plays 3 o'clock, it's probably nothing, I'm sure." While sitting in the back seat, he puts the phone away, and at that moment outside the school, a paranoid Kat remembers a phone a secret agent gave her before she said goodbye to him on the icebreaker. If she ever felt threatened to dial the only number in the contact, she'll need to state a time and location and hang up. When she asked him who would get the message, he said,
"Posterity."
So Kat gets on the blower and says,
Cannon Place, 3 o'clock. Probably nothing.
Revealing that this version of the protagonist that sits with a gun at Priya's back is from the future. She insists she's only doing her job and tying up loose ends as instructed by a future handler. Our hero tells her that tying up loose ends is someone else's responsibility, and when she asks who, he debriefs her.
I realized I wasn't working for you. We've both been working for me.
His future self is Priya's mystery boss, and the reason he knows the history of things to come is because Priya told him everything when they met in Oslo.
Paradox.
The mystery boss truly was the man with no name. He goes on to create a time pincer organisation and bases their super secret hand gesture on what Neil told him in the Freeport shipping container regarding the 2 directions of time. He designs the word and gesture to be understandable by both inverted and conventional agents. He creates the CIA security question based on the damage done to the world by previous generations, and posterity wanted to kill them because of it. The anonymous lone leader eventually goes on to name his organisation simultaneously after his faith in belief, plus the 10-minute mission that Red Team and Blue Team pulled off at the same time to save the world from the threat its inhabitants were ignorant to. And that mission was 10 minutes forwards and 10 minutes backwards.
Tennis. That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
In your breakdown, to save time, you probably just called him John, but he don't care. You'd be forgiven for thinking his name's JD, because he's John Doe by choice.
You're the
man with no name.
But since he's officially dead and there's no record of him, he just sticks with the name that Priya gave him.
I'm the protagonist.
Priya, whilst being disappointed with this news, is loyal to the cause and says, well, you better tie up those loose ends then, meaning her. And since she's an arms dealer, this is the easiest trigger he's ever had to pull. He kills Priya and whispers to himself, mission accomplished. Catherine, who's not actually in any danger anymore, brushes off the eerie feeling as a bit of normal PTSD.
That's paranoia.
As Max comes out of school, we hear the ghost of Neil.
They're the people saving the world from what might have been. Well, we'll never know what could have happened. And even if they did, they wouldn't care. Because no one cares about the bomb that didn't go off. Only the one that did. It's the bomb that didn't go off. Danger no one knew was real. That's the bomb with the real power to change the world.
And just as we hear the last of Neil, the protagonist looks past the two dead bodies and out of the front windshield to see Max come out of school to be picked up by his mum instead of his au pair. And as they walk off together hand in hand to start a happy life, the protagonist sees Maximilian's backpack and it all clicks into place for him. Kat and Neil both have blonde hair and the exact same accent. They're both tall with a clear resemblance, and Neil spoke Estonian, which would have been a second language to him as his evil father who tried to kill his mother was from the old Soviet Union. So from this point on, 10-year-old Max is watched over by John. Eventually he's mentored by him, and as time goes by they strike up a powerful friendship based on what our hero already knows about him. And that makes way more sense and is more in line with the character than John grooming Max from an early age into a sexual relationship like Philip Schofield. That would be like an inverted version of Woody Allen not growing his own weed but growing his own. Max receives the finest education, including a master's in physics, before John recruits him into the TENET organisation. In his 20s, he's taught about inversion, turnstiles and the history of things to come, except for how and when he dies. Ignorance is our ammunition and his ignorance is our only protection. Max's mission, should he choose to accept it, is to invert and live in a specially ventilated compound, travelling back 10 years in reverse the entire time.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's leaving me!
Because I was inverted.
Bullshit!
Till he eventually reverts back to normal in his 30s just in time to save John at the Kiev Opera House. At the exact same moment his past 10-year-old self was watching his dad's so-called mistress dive off their yacht the day his father vanished, existing in multiple timelines at once.
No, he was, man. It was a really great move.
It was, and it must have taken a lot because Max was inverted for a massive portion of his life, at least a third of it travelling 10 years into the past. That's right, for an entire decade.
She was inverted.
He then chooses to codename Neil as it's a third of his name, the last 4 letters of his full name, Maximilian, reversed. The son of a maniacal father who terrorised his mother and premeditated an extinction-level event. A madman who made a deal with the devil to destroy the world in exchange for money and power. A monster who tried to reverse God's infallible plan by inverting entropy for all, breaking the laws of physics and nature. In 1867, James Clerk Maxwell theorised this demonic creature, and the British mathematician Lord Kelvin named it.
What do you mean by that?
So some might say Maximilian's father, Andrei Sator, truly was Maxwell's demon.
I came from violence. It's in my blood. My dad had it. His dad had it. It's all just my fate. You believe in fate, boy? My fate.
So in the future, John decides to send Max back to protect him and introduce him to the reality of inversion, knowing that codename Neil will have to earn his trust all over again before they become bros and he eventually gives up his life for him, taking the bullet and sealing his fate, weaving another thread in the fabric of the mission. The ending really kicks your heart in the arse when you realise they both only get half of a friendship and they both lose it before either one knows what they had. The protagonist that we were on a journey with in the present saw a stranger when they met in India. But Maximilian, masquerading as Neil, sees his old friend and mentor before he went grey. They both have the bittersweet knowledge that they will have time together, albeit very limited.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but I love you, dog. I got your motherfucking back. Right. Just know this shit.
Oh, and as for Ives, after not murder-suiciding himself and his teammates, he went on to bury his section of the algorithm, sending it further into the past, and instead of catching a bullet train, this cockney cunt from East London decided to go off script and enjoy life for a bit. After years of adventures, he inverts all the way back to the year 2000 just to revert and rejoin forward-moving society as Michael Crosby. With knowledge of the future, he enjoys a comfortable life and spends the next 20 years working his way up the chain of command of British intelligence until he gets knighted. He retires shortly after an Indian arms dealer he knows sets up a meeting with an anonymous young agent where he can debrief the nameless man regarding some sensitive information.
Started without you. Hope you don't mind. I'll catch you.
So in order to get your head around it and wrap this up in a neat little bow, just know our main characters remain trapped in a loop so the rest of us can go on oblivious and ungrateful. It's like Neil, Max or Mini Sator, whatever you want to call him, said, they're the people saving the world from what might have been. And even if people did know, nobody cares about the bomb that didn't go off or the threat that no one knew was real. The exact same thing happened when this movie came out during the pandemic. The film came and went without much consequence, just a bunch of theoretical worms to unpack and think about afterwards in retrospect. If we circle back to what I said in Tenet Part 1, the past, all films are psychological and emotional time pincers.
Been here before?
Yes.
When?
But Tenet in particular. First time around you go through it like the protagonist, not really knowing what's going on, so you just gotta feel it. You get debriefed and learn the rules as you go along before you eventually discover the big reveal that makes you look at everything and the world in a new way. The next time we watch it, we basically go through it as nil. We've already seen the events and know the exact way that they play out. You can experience the events again and again, but you can't change any of the details because what's happened, happened. But with each viewing, you get a little bit older and wiser.
The movie never changes. It can't change, but every time you see it, it seems different because you're different. You see different things.
So I guess what I'm saying is watch it once to go along with the experience and have faith in its creator, then watch it again to re-experience the time loop with a better understanding every time you replay it.
You got it?
Yeah. If you can't change anything because it's already happened, you may as well smell the flowers.
What flowers?
Nah, I didn't think so. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Get off my desk.
So thanks for sticking with me through this extensive movie breakdown that's nearly as long as the fucking movie.
That whole thing was James Bond time, right?
Fine deduction. We'll conclude this next time in the final part of the trilogy, Tenet, the Future. So next time in our finale, we're going to discuss our future scientist, the antagonist, the man in the crystalline tower, and how it all connects to Interstellar.
Wow, I just learned while I was being entertained.
So hit the bell, like the video, and sub to the channel. It helps me in the algorithm.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
Now. You're looking at now, sir. Everything that happens now is happening now.
What happened to then?
We passed that.
When?
Just now. We're at now.
Go back to then.
When?
Now.
Now?
Now.
I can't.
Why?
We missed it.
When?
Just now.
When will then be now?
Soon.
This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds.